Hey guys. This is part 3 of What If Naruto was in RWBY. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 11. Heaving a sigh, Naruto ran a hand through his sun-kissed blonde locks as he stared intently at the seemingly innocent ring. However, in his eyes, the superficially harmless piece of jewelry was mocking him, a reminder of his failure to not only save his fellow Jinchuriki, but his failure in following his nindo, his way of life. Having thought he was in a different dimension had eased his guilt, at least when he told himself that there was a chance he could still go back and fix all the wrongs, become the savior Jiraiya and so many others had thought him to be. Seeing the Akatsuki ring sat on the small pillow in front of him, however, drove the point home. There was no going back. He couldn't save his precious people. They were long dead and had been for what could only be centuries by now. He had failed and there was nothing he could do. "You didn't fail," rang the gruff voice of Kurama as he appeared at his Jinchuriki's side. Having felt the massive influx of chakra from someone other than himself or his container was alarming, considering that, for all intents and purposes, he and the blonde were the only people capable of using it anymore. When he didn't get a reply from his container, followed by the massive amount of negativity that began to flow through their bond, had caused the Biju even more worry. Seeing the cause of it all brought up feelings of anger and disgust, though that would come later. He had a depressed Jinchuriki to deal with. "Of course I failed. They're all dead. And it's my fault. Sakura, Kakashi, Bachan, Irika, Sasuke, they're all dead and it's all my fault. I let them all down." Kurama watched with a blank face as Naruto clenched his fists tight enough to draw blood, tears beginning to leak out from the corners of his eyes as he gazed at the reminder of a time now long gone, a time not even the annals of history seemed to recall. Fed up with the pity party, the kitsune jumped up and smacked the blonde on the back of the head. "Stop blubbering. You didn't fail. You are acting like you had a choice. That choice was taken from you when that one-eyed sensei of yours decided to use his Sharingan on you. If anyone is to blame for what happened, it's him. Besides that, would you rather the alternative have happened? If memory serves me correctly, you were seconds away from being caught by that masked Uchiha. Had that scarecrow not used his Kamui, Akatsuki would have had all of us Biju." Turning around and beginning to walk out of the shrine, Kurama huffed, "Now stop all your pissing and moaning and let's go. We still have to find out how that ring ended up in this village." As Kurama left through the entryway, a smile began to creep its way onto Naruto's face, his hands unclenching while his healing factor quickly kicked in, knitting the small wounds together in seconds. Using the back of his hand, the blonde wiped away the tears, his blue orbs shining vividly once again. "Thanks, buddy." With a firm nod to himself, Naruto narrowed his eyes before grabbing the ring and slipped it on his left thumb. To his surprise, he felt an odd pulling sensation from the ring, the piece of jewelry drawing on his and his Biju's chakra in equal amounts. Seeing as how both he and Kurama each had ocean-sized reserves, it was hardly a cause for worry, but it was still odd. He had honestly thought that the rings were just some form of membership card for the Akatsuki, so either the rings reacted differently to Jinchuriki and their Biju, which was highly likely seeing as how they were used to extract a tailed beast from its container, or the rings all reacted in the same way to chakra. Seeing as how the thing had drawn only a small amount to him, and was seemingly content with it, Naruto shrugged and resolved to figure it out later. Right now, the more pressing matter was figuring out how the village had gotten a hold of the artifact, and why they had built a shrine to it like it was some holy item. While the issue of the ring was at the forefront of his mind, Naruto was happy to see both his teammates and Team CFEY unharmed along with a huge portion of the villagers. There had been a few casualties and injuries due to the surprise attack, but no more than a handful or so. The blonde shinobi did take note of the wary glances Rin, Nora, Fox, and Velvet were sending towards Kurama, who was currently wrapped around his neck as usual. They no doubt had questions, but seeing the grinning village elder took precedence. Marching up to the kindly smiling man, Naruto narrowed his eyes and raised his hand, showing the ring that he now wore. "Where did you get this?" The retired huntsman along with most of the adult villagers gasped in horror, the man now angrily glaring at the blonde captain. "How dare you! You have no right to wear that ring! Give it back or face the consequences!" Seeing the old man take up a fighting stance with the villagers looking ready to form a mob put the two teams on edge, Naruto meanwhile still stared the man down. Pira put a hand on her friend and captain's shoulder. Naruto, what's going on? Not tearing his gaze away from the smoldering brown eyes of the huntsman, Naruto bit out. This is what the Grimm were after. This is why those two Beowulfs were so intent on destroying this village. What I'm wondering is how these people got their hands on it. It was a gift from our patron. With it and the other 9 rings we would have been able to give life to our god who would bring us salvation. Our 10-tailed god would have wiped the world clean of all Grimm and you filthy faunus, cleansing Remnant and ushering in an age of dash. The man was cut off when Naruto violently plowed his fist into the raving man's cheek, sending him to the ground. Having heard how the man addressed Faunus, Velvet Mood had instantly plunged, her hair now covering her face as she tried to look as small as possible. Of course her teammates did not take too kindly to this and Koko looked ready to copy Naruto's actions. Nora had gasped in shock, while Rin had a frown stretched across his face and Pira was gazing at the fallen huntsman in what looked to be pity and disgust. I've dealt with pricks like you enough times and heard enough stupid rants, I don't need to hear another one. We may have saved you this time, but if I were you I'd pray to that god of yours that another pack of Grimm don't attack, 'cause I'll tell you right now, don't expect any help from us or anyone from Vale again. Naruto snarled. Turning his back to the glaring old man, Naruto turned to Koko who was still keeping an eye on the bigot. Our ride almost here? Yeah, called it in when you went after that Beowulf so it should be here in a few. We won't just let you leave with that ring. You will give it back. Rising from the ground, the elderly man rushed at Naruto's exposed back, a shard of glass gripped tightly in his hands. The others were prepared for this though, and were already reaching for their weapons by the time the old huntsman had gotten up. The blonde leader of NNPR however proved he was more than capable of taking care of himself when he turned around and grabbed the man's wrist, snapping it with ease. The man cried out in pain as he felt the bones in his wrist being broken into pieces. Those cries died into whimpers when he stared into the now bloody crimson orbs of Naruto, his mouth slightly opened in a snarl showing off the elongated fangs. Unless you want me to break the rest of the bones in your body, I'd give it up. This ring isn't yours and I am taking it for safekeeping. Don't like it? Too bad. Tossing the still whimpering old man to the ground, Naruto raised an eyebrow when he turned around to see Velvet wide-eyed and Koko looking at him with her own brow raised in questioning. Well, now I see why you came to Velvet's defense. The whiskers should have given it away actually. The mocha-haired leader of CFVY commented. It was only then that Naruto realized that he had drawn upon Kurama's chakra in his rush of anger, something that hadn't happened for quite some time now. Normally it wouldn't be a cause for any worry, but to Naruto it showed that his control on his emotions was slipping. Again, normally not a bad thing, but if he allowed his anger and hatred to really get the best of him, even with him and Kurama being on much better terms, the ensuing rampage could be catastrophic. Each time he had lost himself to his anger, he had nearly killed someone close to him, and it had taken the efforts of shinobi decades more experienced than him to restrain him long enough to snap out of it. However, said shinobi knew about his Jinchuriki status and had been prepared for just such an event. No one on Remnant could possibly be prepared for the power of an enraged Jinchuriki. Sighing as he realized that the day was only giving him more and more to think on later, Naruto nodded. Yeah, you could say I'm pretty familiar with being an outcast. While everyone else was content to take his words at face value, Koko narrowed her eyes, taking note that the blonde didn't say he was a faunus, just that he knew what it was like to be an outcast. While most would wave it off, the elder teen was not so quick to dismiss it. You're hiding something, Whiskers. Whatever suspicions she may have had were put to rest when she saw a now cheerfully smiling Velvet animatedly talking with the enigmatic blonde. But I won't pry, for now. Naruto, wake up. Pira whispered to her snoozing captain. It had been a few days since their joint mission with Team CFVY, and despite the amount of surprises said outing had for them, the 4 teens were quick to simply fall back on their old schedule like nothing had changed. Wake up, light training session, go to classes, do any homework, joint training session, shower, finish homework, and sleep. Of course there were still questions many of them had concerning what had happened during the mission, Rin especially wanting his answered as they concerned what they had all thought was just their captain's cute pet. No one had bothered to approach said blonde about their questions though, as he seemed to be in some sort of haze, working on who knows what and muttering to himself. The 3 teens were very much so aware of their friend's inhuman stamina, but the loss of sleep and stress was getting to be enough for it to noticeably affect even Naruto. While sleeping in class was nothing new for the carefree teen, he was now beginning to do it in every class and for the entirety of the lessons as well. During training sessions he was slipping up more and more, to the point that Nora had managed to score a decisive blow on him and crack most of his ribs. Pyrrha had ended the training session right then and there despite Naruto's protests. The redhead second in command had also tried to convince her friend to slow down and rest, but he had simply brushed her off with one of his usual grins. That didn't help though, seeing as the gesture had none of the usual vibrancy and cheer that it usually did. As the bell that signaled the end of class rang, Professor Port, sending a knowing glance to the worried teens of Team NNPR, Team RWBY, approached their fellow team, Ruby looking especially concerned for her fellow captain. Blake was looking at the sleeping form of her fellow, Faunus, with worry, wondering what was the cause of it. Yang managed to somehow look both angry and worried at the same time, while Weiss attempted to maintain her aloof persona, though her occasional glance and frown in Naruto's direction defeated that purpose. "Slept through the entire lesson again?" Ruby asked as her silver orbs worriedly went over the bedraggled-looking blonde, frown marring her face. Pyrrha nodded. "Slept through Professor Oblek's class as well. I've tried talking to him, but he just acts like nothing's wrong." Rolling up her sleeves, RWBY's busted brawler began marching towards her fellow blonde. "Give me a few minutes and I'll beat it out of him." "Yan, no! That won't help." The youngest of the group spoke, stopping her sister from pummeling her first friend at Beacon. The raven-haired teen of RWBY crossed her arms as she gazed at the snoozing, and now drooling, blonde. "Did anything happen on that mission that would cause him to act like this?" Pyrrha bit her lip and thought. "No. We defeated the Grimm, but found out that the village had some ring the Grimm were after. Naruto did seem pretty mad about them having the ring for some reason though." "You mean the ring he's wearing now?" Weiss pointed out. The others gazed at the piece of jewelry that sat on Naruto's left pinky, none of them having seen it before. Ren decided to chip in. "I have seen him studying it and talking to Kurama. I can never hear what about, but the two do seem focused on it." "Oh yeah. Fuzzy Wuzzy also disappears a lot and only comes back late at night." Nora beamed, feeling that she was helping. Despite her cheery attitude, it was still noticeable to everyone that it wasn't her same level of being upbeat, clearly worried for her captain as well. "Blake, isn't that one of those kanji things you're always reading? What's it mean?" Yang pointed out as she gazed at the ring. Narrowing her eyes, the young cat Faunus peered at the kanji before raising a brow. "It could either mean sphere or ball. It doesn't really have any special meaning." "Did he say why the Grimm would want it?" "No, but the elder of the village did say something about it, and the other 9 rings being able to wake up their 10-tailed god or something," Ren answered. "A 10-tailed god? Where have I heard that? It sounds familiar, but I can't quite remember why," Blake pondered. Her train of thought was interrupted when the formerly sleeping Naruto jumped up from his position, a kunai in hand, and held to Yang's throat, whose hand was wrapped around the ring on his other hand. For a moment no one moved, too shocked to even say anything. "Foxy, it's me, Yang." That one small phrase seemed to snap Naruto out of it as he lowered the kunai and stepped back, chuckling nervously. Sorry about that, Yang." Reflexes. Before anyone could really say anything, Yang marched up to her fellow blonde and grabbed him by his collar and pulled their faces close. "All right, Foxy, no more of this pretending everything's okay. We are all worried about you, and I am damn tired of seeing my little sister worry herself sick over you because you want to be a stubborn ass. Out with it. What is up with that ring, and why are you and your furry friends so focused on it?" Gazing around him, Naruto took in the worried looks of everyone around him, the sight of their stares making him hang his head. "Kami, I've been such an ass." He and Kurama had been so absorbed by the rings due to their own worries of where the other rings were, but also fretted over what else had survived from their time. The most stressful thought was that if the rings had survived, then it was highly likely that the Geto Mazo, demonic statue of the outer path, was also hidden somewhere as well. By itself the demonic statue was all but useless, but both Kurama and Naruto didn't know if the thing still contained the Biju that the Akatsuki had managed to capture by the time they went for him and the 8 Tails Jinchuriki, Kurabi. If it did, then whoever managed to get their hands on the 10 rings and find the statue would have the power of either 8 or 7 of the Biju at their disposal, something that even caused Kurama some apprehension. As such, he had been sending out hundreds of clones to scour Remnant alongside the Kyuubi in search of any other artifacts. So far they had managed to find the remains of a few of the minor villages, or at least where they once stood, and a few scrolls that gave them a vague idea of what may have happened after Naruto was sent into the future via Kakashi's Kamui. Still, it was nothing solid, which did nothing to ease their minds. Most concerning was their inability to find any sign of any of the major hidden villages. He knew Konoha had a few items sealed away, like the Fuin no Sho scroll of seals, that would be guarded against even the ravages of time, and figured the other villages would have similar systems, but neither his clones or Kurama could find anything. Sighing, Naruto nodded. "You're right, I have been an ass and I'm sorry. It's just the whole business with the rings has got me stressed and worried." Satisfied that he had admitted to his own mistakes, Yang placed the blonde shinobi down and put her hands on her hips. "Alright, well, spill. What's up with these rings that's got you all worried?" Running his hands through his hair, Naruto mentally shrugged, figuring that it would be pointless to lie to them. "Back home we weren't called huntsmen, but shinobi." "Wait, you mean like sneaky, pajama dudes?" Yang asked. Naruto had to laugh at that one. "No, we were more like mercenaries. You needed a job done, you could go to our village and ask us to do it for a fee. We'd do anything and everything from yard work to assassinations and espionage. However, some people would have issues with their village and would abandon it. Of course, seeing as how they knew village secrets like guard details and our techniques, this wasn't exactly smiled upon. They were called Nuke-Nin." Blake interrupted with a translation. "Runaway shinobi." "Yup. Most did it because they committed some crime or wanted money or something dumb like that. There was a group of Nuke-Nin that got the attention of all our villages though. They were a group of 10 extremely powerful rogue shinobi. One guy, Akasuna no Sasori dash." Blake again chimed in with a translation. "Scorpion of the Red Sands. Went rogue after he killed the leader of his village in battle and turned him into a human weapon. My teammate's brother was also a part of the group and had went rogue after he slaughtered his entire family in a single night, leaving only my teammate as the sole survivor. The others could listen in abject horror as they heard the atrocities these people had committed. More worrying was how strong they had to be. If Naruto feared them and was any sort of measuring bar for how powerful these guys were, then there was no way anyone bar someone like Ashbin or Glinda could match them, and they were veteran huntsmen with decades of experience under their belt. They called themselves Akatsuki." The others looked at Blake expectantly. Daybreak. Each member of the group wore a black cloak with red clouds on it, and wore one of these. Here Naruto raised his hand up to show the ring on his finger. Pira posed the winning question. What were they after? And why do the Grimm want their rings? Sighing again as he realized that he would either tell them the truth here and now, or they would connect the dots themselves. Either way, there was no way he was getting out of this without lying to their faces, something he didn't want to do. They were his friends, his precious people. There are 9 monstrously powerful beings called the Biju. The young cat Faunus raised a brow at that one. Tailed beasts? Nodding his head, Naruto continued. They are the split pieces of what we consider to be the origin of all our powers, the RWBY, or 10-tailed god. Even split, they are almost like forces of nature, and, being made purely out of energy, they cannot die. Once upon a time they were free to roam the land. The 2 founders of my village, however, had a falling out, and in a battle, one of them called out the strongest of the 9, the Kyubi no Kitsune. Blake narrowed her eyes as dots were beginning to connect in her mind, a thought process shared by the others when she translated the name. The 9-tailed fox. Ren's eyes widened as he recalled the battle between Kurama and the Beowulf. My village's leader had the power to subdue the tailed beasts, but not even his power could fully tame it, so his wife, my ancestor, stepped in, and thanks to her mastery of Fuinjutsu, she sealed the Kyubi in herself, becoming a Jinchuriki. Her own eyes widened as the connotation of what Naruto just said hit her, and with a whisper Blake uttered out the translation, this time more out of shock than anything else. Power of the human sacrifice. Not exactly seeing the connection or why Blake was so shocked by the word, the others instead turned back to Naruto, now too far into the story. My village leader wanted there to be peace throughout the world, so he and his wife went about collecting the other 8 Biju, and gave them as gifts to the other major villages. The ultimate goal of Akatsuki was to take the 9-tailed beasts and put them back together, reviving the RWBY. After that, I don't know what they planned. Naruto finished out. Seeing Blake already staring at him in shock, he knew that the proverbial moment of truth was now. It was here that he would either be accepted, or they'd call Ashbin and have him thrown in the loony bin faster than he could eat a bowl of ramen. Weiss seemed to be the most skeptical out of the whole group as she posed the million-dollar question. Wait, hold on. If all this is true, how come none of us has ever heard of these Akat whatever guys or these tailed beasts? And you said villages? I thought you were from outside the borders of the kingdoms. As one, his teammates and the rest of Team RWBY turned to him, realizing that Weiss was right. Even if it had been outside the bounds of the Four Kingdoms, one man murdering his entire clan in a single night would have still been major news, and if Akatsuki was such a huge threat, then the other kingdoms would have been notified and sent huntsmen as aid to stop the group. Moment of truth, Naruto sighed. That's because none of this happened recently, not even within the last century or so. All of it, the shinobi lifestyle and Akatsuki, are long dead, buried under the sands of time. Pira stared at her captain curiously. Then how do you know all of this? Because Kurama is the Kyuubi no Kitsune and I am his Jinchuriki. I am a shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato and, as far as I know, the only survivor of that time, Naruto admitted. Jaws dropped as the other teens stared at their blonde friend in shock as he confidently stated that he was a time traveler, a mercenary and child soldier from a past that had apparently been so long ago that no one in the present day even knew about it. Far too thrown off by the bold statement, no one said anything for a moment, the others staring at him wide-eyed while Naruto stared back with all the confidence in the world, not willing to back down. So you are a magician? Nora shouted out, finally deciding to throw in her own 2 cents on the matter. Whatever tension there may have been before was instantly shattered as Naruto began chuckling while the others could only sweat drop in amazement at the oddity that was Nora Valkyrie. With the tension eased, Young felt it appropriate to ask her next question. So what, you're some really old all-powerful immortal here, because this is where Konoha used to be and you just so happened to get roped into all of this? Naruto stared incredulously at his fellow blonde. What? No, that's dumb and even more far out there than Nora thinking I'm a magician. Both Yang and Nora gave an indignant cry at that, both feeling offended for different reasons. Shaking his head as he and the others laughed at the two pouting teens, Naruto continued. No. My village was being attacked by the leader of Akatsuki. I was one of the last Jinchuriki, and so he came to get me to get Kurama. Me and my village fought as best we could against him and his army, but in the end we were losing, by a lot. In a last-ditch effort to stop Akatsuki from getting their hands on me and by extension, Kurama, my original sensei used a special jutsu of his, Kamui. Blake sighed as she saw the others turn to her, waiting for her to translate. Authority of the gods. It was a special jutsu only he and the leader of Akatsuki could use, but my sensei's was different. It allowed him to create a hole in space and time where he could send items or other people into. Anyways, he used it on me, and next thing I know is I'm waking up in some forest about to be eaten by some grim. Been here in Remnant ever since. While the others seemed to be coming to terms with the massive amount of information they had just been told, Blake finally decided to voice something that had been bothering her ever since she had figured out what Naruto was getting at. Why did you lie to us? Why go through the trouble of creating these lies, and most importantly, why lie about you being a faunus? It was extremely clear that the young cat faunus was equal parts hurt and angry that someone she had trusted had lied to her face, especially after what she had disclosed to him. More than anything, she was mad at herself for trusting him. She wasn't alone though, Pira and RWBY looking just as hurt. Shaking his head, Naruto spoke up with confidence. I never outright lied to you. I never told the full truth, but I never said I was a faunus. You all just assumed that, because of how I look when I use Kurama's chakra. RWBY finally stepped up, her voice dripping with emotion. Then why not correct us? Why did you let us believe all of that? Naruto sighed, damn her cuteness. It should be a crime for someone to be so adorable. RWBY's cuteness aside, he shook his head. How does this sound? Hey, my name's Naruto Uzumaki. I'm a shinobi from a few thousand years ago, and this is my buddy Kurama, a super powerful chakra mass who could probably destroy Veil by accident. Nice to meet you. Besides that, I only recently figured out I was in the future myself. Sweat dropping, the other teens realized how strange that really sounded. They were more likely to call the nice men in white coats than they were to believe him, let alone continue a conversation with someone who opened with that. Sure, even if he had waited a while to tell them, they still would have been highly incredulous, if not outright called him a liar. Really, there was no early point at which he could have admitted the truth to them without there being some feeling of incredulity. Sorry. They chimed together. The blonde time-traveling shinobi waved them off. It's fine, there were plenty of other times I could have at least mentioned something, so it's partially my fault as well. Her fears put at ease, Blake asked another question. So what now? Are you gonna try and find your way back to your time? Stretching out his arms behind his head and leaning back in his chair, Naruto eased up. A few weeks ago and I would have said yes, but Kurama said it's a miracle I made it the first time. If I tried again there's no guarantee I would even end up in MY time, something about the multiverse. Besides, I like it here, I like being here with you all. My sensei sent me here and his last words to me were, live the life you never got to, and I plan on doing that. Wrapping an arm around her fellow blonde's neck, Yang cheered. Good. 'Cause it wouldn't be the same without you, Foxy. Nora joined in the cheer. She's right. Who would be our awesome kick but Captain if you weren't? Besides that, you're the only one who can teach me magic. Then I'll become a magical queen and all my subjects will fear and love me, muahahaha. Naruto turned to his only fellow male in the room. She had pancakes with syrup again, huh? Rin face-palmed, but nodded. I tried to stop her. Yes, but he was distracted when this huge Nevermore swooped down and picked me up. She tripped over her own blankets and got tangled. But its claws were no match for my might, and I managed to free myself using Magnahild. She ripped a hole in the blanket. Rin stood in shock and awe of my strength as I tangled with the fearsome Grim. I was brushing my teeth, laughing just as loudly as the others as the two childhood friends continued on with Nora animatedly waving her hands around. Naruto let his mind wander. I'm sorry I couldn't save you guys, but thanks to you Kakashi-sensei, I'm happy and found precious people again. This time, I won't let them down. Cinder, you can't be serious. The kid knows who you are. You'd have not just him, but that old codger Ashpin and his buddy Glinda on you in no time. Roman Torchwick exclaimed to the shorter woman who was currently buttoning up a familiar-looking cardigan. Smoothing out the ends of her skirt, the raven-haired woman turned around and gazed at her accomplice. Roman, shut up. Without a word more, Cinderfall exited the room, the sound of her heels echoing throughout the warehouse they were currently in. Grabbing a cigar from inside his coat, Torchwick sneered. TCH, whatever. More for me when they throw your pretty little head in the slammer for life, stupid broad. I don't think Cinder would like to know you're talking about her behind her back, Torchwick. Narrowing his eyes even further as the cold steel of a metallic green blade was held to his throat from behind, Torchwick laughed. Oh please, me and her are just close like that. Besides that, twirling around he held his cane to the forehead of a young teen. You should know when to not mess with your betters, Emerald. The now named Emerald, a mocha-skinned beauty with mint green hair, wine-red eyes, and a rather revealing outfit, grinned, not all bothered by the weapon aimed at her forehead. I don't know, do you see my better anywhere around here, Mercury? In response, a voice dripping in sarcasm replied from behind Torchwick. I think he was talking about me. You are always so mean to me. The mocha-skinned teen rolled her eyes. God, I will pay you to shut up for one day. The silver-haired youth, his foot held up to the crime boss' back, feigned a hurt expression. See? Besides, you're the one who asked me a question, it's only polite I respond. As the two teens bantered, Roman could only grit his teeth, realizing that no matter what he did, he was stuck. Knowing that either teen would put a bullet through his skull if Cinder gave the word did nothing to ease his mind. Enough, the both of you, said Amber-eyed Beauty called as she stood in the doorway. Emerald was quick to drop her weapons, apologizing to the elder woman. Sorry, Cinder. Roman here was just stepping out of line, so I acted without my say-so. Buffoon he may be, but Roman still has his uses. Now let's go. Neo is quite eager to try on her uniform as well. As the three left, Emerald childishly blew a raspberry at Torchwick while the effeminate man only sneered. Damn brats. Naruto let out a yawn as he stretched out his limbs, the feeling of a good night's rest having refreshed him physically and mentally. Though the long rest wasn't really his choice and he had pretty much been ordered by both Pyrrha and Yang to get a full 8 hours of sleep. While at first he had put up some resistance, the pleading look of his red-headed teammate and the threatening look of his fellow blonde had been enough to convince him otherwise. Sitting at the edge of his bed as the last vestiges of sleep left his body, he had to admit that they were right. He was feeling far better than he had been feeling the last few days, his thoughts a little more clear. Seeing the vacant beds of his teammates didn't surprise him, Pyrrha having told him the night before that they were going to get some personal training in. Again, he had tried to protest, but a stern look from his second-in-command quickly shut him up. Pyrrha was very much so a gentle, caring person, but could be downright scary when she wanted to. He wondered if that was a trait common to all redheads or just the girls he knew. Coming out of the restroom after having taken a soothing morning shower and taking care of his other morning activities, Naruto raised a brow as he saw a casually dressed RWBY petting Kurama as she gazed at all kunai, shuriken, and other shinobi tools he had on his desk. Having heard the door open, the younger teen turned to greet the blonde with a bright smile, only for her cheeks to instantly heat up as she gazed at the chiseled form of a shirtless Naruto. He was by no means extremely muscled or anything, but it was pretty evident that he trained intensely. However, what really caught her eye was the massive scar that lay over his heart. Sure, there were a few others that littered his body, evidence of his lifestyle as a shinobi, but this particular mark caught her eye due to its size and position. It looked to be about the size of a fist and had angry lines arcing out from the center which lay directly over his heart. The scar was old though, the outer edges and most of the arcs having already faded or lightened up. Seeing where her gaze was directed at, Naruto grabbed his nearby shirt and slipped it on. Got that for being a stubborn idiot? That really made RWBY wonder. That was no flesh wound kind of scar. No, whatever had caused it was more than likely life-threatening, but the ease that the Jinchuriki brushed it off told her he wasn't exactly proud of what had happened to cause it. So what's going on, Red? Naruto asked as he went about putting on his various weapons pouches. The young leader of Team RWBY pouted. No one wants to hang out with me. Yan said something about training, Weiss is busy with some dumb project, and Blake went to the library. Chuckling, Naruto patted the still pouting girl on the head. Well, Pira and Yan still have me on a strict no-training punishment, so how's about you and I go do something? RWBY only giggled as she nodded. I still find it funny how you're afraid of my sister and Pira. Now it was Naruto's turn to pout. They're scary to Bayo. Having been there when her sister and his teammate had literally ordered him to rest and take it easy, she was inclined to agree. Still, the fact that a battle-hardened shinobi from the past was scared of two teenage girls made her giggle. Rising to her feet, Kurama moving himself to her shoulders where he sat like he usually did with his container, RWBY had to take a moment to remember that the small adorable fox curled around her neck was actually a mighty beast who could destroy the four kingdoms on a whim. After Naruto had told them the truth of what he was, he also explained just why the Akatsuki going after the tailed beasts was a very bad thing, telling them that the Biju were not just powerful, but more like forces of nature, none more so than the one he contained. As the strongest of the Biju and having the largest piece of the RWBY's power meant Kurama was capable of flattening entire mountains and summoning massive tidal waves, all with the flick of one his tails. I'd watch it, Red. Kurama has been putting on some weight. Naruto mocked. Seeing as how Naruto had shared their secret, Kurama was happy to stop playing the part of a slightly more intelligent than average fox, and retorted out loud. Says the baka who eats his own weight in that ramen crap. Gasping like an old woman who heard a young person curse in public, Naruto replied. You take that back. Ramen is the food of the gods. Sweat dropping. As the two continued to hurl insults at each other like bickering siblings, RWBY also noted how hard it was to believe that Naruto was in all actuality a child soldier who had years more training and experience than some active huntsman. Really, it was hard to believe the whole situation, but the facts and signs were there and hard to deny. Shrugging off those more serious thoughts, the young teen interrupted the two squabbling time travelers with a loud whistle. Seeing that she now had their attention, RWBY smiled. Well, let's go! I heard from Pira that you guys had found this awesome weapons shop. Seeing the twinkle in her eyes as she said that, Naruto was reminded of how his godfather looked when he found out that Tsunade had decided to make a trip to the local hot spring to unwind. He had that same twinkle in his eyes even after said Busta Sanin had proceeded to beat him within an inch of his life after she caught her teammate peeping on her. Disregarding the odd look in RWBY's eyes, Naruto shrugged. Yeah, sounds like a good idea. I do have to drop off some supplies to them and pick up some stuff. As the three left the room, Naruto decided to ask Kurama something. So, why are you okay with her carrying you and not anyone else except me? The Biju took a moment to respond. She reminds me of you when you were younger. Optimistic, stubborn, childish, naive, and eager to prove yourself. Having expected a sarcastic response, Naruto was caught off guard by the honesty with which Kurama spoke. Grinning, the teen shinobi stretched his arms out behind his head. So you do have a soft spot for me. TCH, I said when you were younger. You're just a stubborn jackass now, Kurama mocked. Sweat dropping at the quick change in attitude, Naruto replied, Love ya too, Fuzzbutt. Back already, Blondie? The mustached chef asked as he saw his now favorite customer/business partner walk through the doors of the AH store. Yeah, figured I'd drop off some more scrolls and tags and pick up some supplies too, Naruto replied. The tattooed store owner would have said more if he didn't spot Ruby, who currently had her face pressed against one of the glass cases that housed some of their more high-end items, looking like she was about ready to start hyperventilating. Hey, no. Being creepy with the merchandise. The young girl quickly removed her face from the glass case and, blushing in embarrassment, nodded her head. Sorry about that. I can get a little carried away with weapons. Laughing at the adorable girl, Jeff waved her off. It's fine. My daughter can get like that too. Got it from my wife, I think. Turning to see Naruto depositing 2 scrolls, one holding the explosive tags and the other more sealing scrolls, no doubt, he addressed the blonde. By the way, Cinder came by looking for you. Narrowing his eyes at the mention of the woman, Naruto asked. She say why? The man shrugged. Nope, just told us to let you know she was looking for you. Before they could continue with their business, a easily recognizable voice shouted from the back. Oh bollocks! Following that was an explosion that rattled the store. Already knowing who was responsible, Jeff put palm to face and slumped over in depression, while Naruto shook his head and chuckled. Ruby looked to be concerned, but was more confused by her friend and the store worker's lack of surprise. Muffled by his palm, the leader of the achievement hunters let out a frustrated groan. Arg! Gavin! One day without you fucking something up is all I ask for. Without a word more, Jeff went through the doors leading to the back room, yelling being heard seconds later, leaving a still chuckling Naruto and an even more concerned Ruby still very much so lost. What just happened? In response, the blonde shinobi waved her off. Nothing out of the ordinary. Of course, this did nothing to answer any of her questions, and she would have been more worried that this was apparently normal if not for what she considered normal. She was friends with a shinobi and a talking fox. Besides that, she was a 15-year-old attending Beacon a year ahead of time, because she helped thwart a robbery orchestrated by infamous crime boss Roman Torchwick. Yeah, she didn't exactly do normal. Dropping her head as she realized this, she patted her knees. No more normal knees for me. Patting the young teen on the head, Naruto sagely nodded his head. Worry not, young one, being normal isn't all that fun anyways. The two shared a laugh before leaving the store, the yelling still coming out of the back along with the occasional high-pitched scream of pain. Stepping out into the sunlight, Naruto was prepared to ask Ruby what she wanted to get for lunch when somebody bumped into him. Turning, he was greeted by a pair of wine-red eyes and mint-green hair. The girl, who looked to be about his age, apologetically waved her hands. I'm so sorry. Wasn't watching where I was going. The blonde grinned and nodded. It's fine, I wasn't watching where I was going either. With a smile and a wave, dark-skinned teen was off. Watching her turn the next corner, Naruto narrowed his eyes. Ruby, wait here. Not even giving her a chance to respond, the Jinchuriki was off in a mad dash, following the girl. Get anything good off him? Mercury asked as he saw his partner turn the corner. Said teen scoffed. TCH, no. All I got was this stupid piece of paper, with some scribbles on it. Guy must be broke or something. No, I just know where to hide stuff to stop pickpockets like you, and let me just say, you are far from being good. Came a voice. Turning, both Emerald and Mercury were shocked to see the subject of their conversation standing there with his arms crossed and looking only slightly annoyed. Rising to the insult, the mint-haired teen snarked back. Oh yeah? And how would you know? Grinning, Naruto pulled out a familiar-looking beaded bracelet. 'Cause I'm better. Wide-eyed, Emerald looked down at her arm to see that the bracelet she normally wore was gone. Having lived on the streets for a few years in his childhood, and being the village pariah had forced Naruto to learn certain skills just to survive. Pickpocketing a regular civilian was no problem, but doing so when in a village where a little more than half the population were trained killers, thieves, and cheats required far better reflexes, stealth, and ingenuity. If at the age of 12 he could paint graffiti on the Hokage monument, a literal mountain, in broad daylight wearing a bright orange jumpsuit without getting caught until he was finished, then pickpocketing an unsuspecting teen his age was easy as pie. Reaching behind her, Emerald pulled out her twin pistols, aiming them both right at Naruto, who seemed unfazed, drawing out high no ishi in a flash. Give it back! The thief snarled. Chapter 12. Despite the twin pistols currently aimed at him, Naruto couldn't resist wondering if a tumbleweed would blow through and really make the whole moment feel like an old Western duel. His short-lived dream of taking part in a shootout was further put down when he realized that he didn't really have the appropriate weapon. He was quick to change moods though. Wonder if I can get one of the guys to augment High No Ishi with a rifle like Piraz or something. The blonde shinobi's thoughts on chakra-enhanced bullets were pushed to the side when he felt two very familiar presences closing in on him. Turning his head slightly, Naruto shook his head as he saw Ruby poke her head into the entrance of the alley with an adorably curious look on her face. The other person was a lot more subtle with their approach and surprised the would-be thief and her partner by appearing beside them. "What did I say about acting without my permission, Emerald?" The mint-haired teen was quick to sheath her two weapons and tried to utter some apology, which Naruto was quick to cut off, now far more serious with the appearance of the amber-eyed femme fatale. "Why am I not surprised these two are with you, Cinder?" While Emerald was ready to let out a retort addressing the blonde teens disrespecting her boss and idol, Cinder only smirked that saucy grin of hers. "If you took me up on my offer I wouldn't have to resort to them, let alone that buffoon." Narrowing his eyes and crossing his arms, Naruto voiced his suspicions. "I still don't exactly know what it is you're after, and with the current company you keep, well, I'm not too eager to help you out." If the raven-haired woman was offended, she did well to hide it. "Then maybe it's time we had that chat of ours." Knowing that Ruby was still nearby, the blonde Jinchuriki reached out to his tenant, Kurama, "Keep Red safe." The tailed beast grunted, acknowledging his container's request. "Watch yourself. She may not be giving off anything of note, but I still don't trust her." Keeping High No Ishi on hand, the blonde shinobi followed after the much shorter woman, apprehension painted clearly across his whiskered cheeks. Even with the serious atmosphere that had settled into the moment, Naruto still couldn't resist his prankster urges as he passed by a scowling Emerald. With a cheeky grin he casually tossed her the bracelet along with two familiar-looking ammo cartridges. "By the way, next time you point a gun at someone, you should probably check if it's loaded first." Wide-eyed, the mint-haired teen hurriedly grabbed one of her guns only to see that they were indeed empty, the weapons that much lighter. Nobody steals from Uzumaki Naruto Tobeo. After a short walk through the market district, Naruto was only slightly surprised when his raven-haired companion led him to the seedier part of Vale only to end up at a very familiar-looking club. It seemed that despite the heavy damage that had been dealt to the business, Junior had managed to get most of it cleaned up and looking decent. Still, it was pretty clear that renovations were still being done, sections of the wall that Kurama had obliterated lacking paint and or drywall. Walking in, the blonde shinobi raised a brow when he saw that what was usually a rowdy nightclub where various illicit activities took place was now a decent-looking restaurant. Seeing the confused look on his whiskered cheeks, Cinder commented, "During the day Junior has the club operate as a high-end eatery. It caters to some of those richer elite politicians and cops, which is how he keeps them off his back." Whatever opinions Naruto had regarding the club owner, he had to admit that the man was smart and crafty. No doubt using said smarts to gain the funds to keep his business up and running. It was only seconds later though that a familiar set of twins had captured either of the Jinchuriki's arms in their grasp. Seductive smiles stretched across their pale faces. "You know, boss was pretty miffed that you went and blew up his club like that," the one in red commented. The other white-themed sister took her turn to speak. "And then left without leaving a tip." As the two continued to talk, Naruto felt his instincts screaming at him to be prepared for a fight. His intuition was validated when he felt two sharp blades pressing into him, one aimed at the back of his neck and the other aimed at his shins. Again, the shinobi in him applauded the twins for their tactics. They had lured him in with words and then trapped him. If he tried anything, he'd have a new hole in his neck or be without the bottom part of one of his legs. Neither was really a favorable option. Then again, situations like this weren't really new to him either. He had evaded the cold grasp of the Shinigami, god of death, and taken much more severe wounds and still managed to come out on top against opponents decades more experienced and powerful than him. Uzumaki longevity and bullheadedness was pretty useful. However, Naruto soon found that he didn't need to worry about defending himself when Cinder gave the twins a stern glare and placed her manicured hands on his shoulder. "He's with me, and unless you want to be the ones to explain to Junior why I stopped coming here, I'd let him go." The identical sisters shared a look before reluctantly releasing their hold on him. Without a word more, the twins left to go do whatever it was they did, leaving him to follow the amber-eyed woman into what looked to be a private room. The small space, enough to fit the two of them with enough room for a handful of others, contained a finely polished table and set of chairs with simple lanterns hanging from the ceiling serving as the only light source. The door that separated them from the rest of the patrons also held the only window, a small square cut into the top half of the entrance. All in all, Even Naruto, being as dense as he was, knew that it was perfectly furnished and lit for a romantic and private dinner for two. Taking the seat across from his current companion, Naruto found himself on the receiving end of an intensely curious look, something he found oddly out of place on a confident woman like Cinder. When the minutes began to tick by with no word said, Naruto began to grow impatient. Deciding that enough was enough, Naruto broke the silence. "Why did you protect me back there? I could have taken care of them." Cinder was not at all fazed by the brash and bold statement. "I have no doubts about that, but I didn't want to get sidetracked any more than we already have." Needless to say, the blonde was a little surprised that the woman across from him was so confident in his own skill. He was positive the only time she had seen him fight was that night back on the docks, but that small victory was due to them not expecting him to intervene, much less toss out such a destructive force like the futon, Raisin Shuriken, then follow it up by breathing out a broiling stream of flames that took on the form of a mythical beast. Yet Cinder acted as if she knew how strong he really was, something not even his teammates were really sure of. "How are you so confident in my fighting abilities? Before today we've barely even spoken a few sentences to each other." Cinder's visage took on the smoldering and seductive look Naruto had begun to associate her with. "Despite what you may think, I know quite a bit about you, Naruto Uzumaki. Chakra user, shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato, and most importantly Jinchuriki to the Kyubi no Kitsune." As soon as the last words left the woman's voluptuous lips, Naruto had leapt over the table, Rasengan in hand and a cold look in his blue orbs. However, the mysterious beauty showed she was not one to be caught off guard so easily, back flipping over her chair, the lines on her maroon dress lighting up as she called forth a wall of fire, stopping Naruto short. Still, this was barely considered an obstacle to the teen as he coated his other hand in a generous amount of wind-natured chakra and easily cut through the flaming defense, continuing his charge towards the femme fatale. As the blonde shinobi was inches away from his impromptu opponent, he shoved his arm forward, intent on burying the swirling ball of chakra into Cinder's abdomen. Again, the skilled woman easily evaded the jutsu at the last second, the Rasengan instead drilling harshly into the wall behind her. Taking advantage of Naruto overextending himself, Cinder used her control over the flame dust that lined her dress and coated her hands in it before grabbing a hold of the Jinchuriki's arm, the fire eating away at his jacket sleeve with the smell of burning flesh soon following. Instead of burning straight through his arm, a feat she was no doubt capable of, the raven-haired beauty shoved a burning fist into Naruto's solar plexus with enough power to send him crashing into the table. Of course, it would take much more than that to put an Uzumaki Jinchuriki down, Naruto already on his feet and speeding towards Cinder once more with Hai no Ishi in hand. Twirling the shakujo, the blonde shinobi aimed a swing at her legs. The amber-eyed beauty merely stepped back to avoid the swing, following up the dodge by stepping on the black metallic staff, effectively keeping Naruto from using it, or so she thought. Having used the bottom half of his weapon to deliver the swing, Naruto gripped the inner bar of the ring that sat atop Hai no Ishi and pulled, drawing out the chikuto that lay hidden inside. His left hand still holding the sheath/staff portion of his weapon, Naruto used his right hand to try and stab Cinder. Once more the petite woman showed her years of experience, in a flourish of flame summoning twin blades of a charcoal gray to parry the stab aimed at her with one, the other quickly cutting through the blonde's shirt and jacket, a splash of crimson trailing after the now bloodied weapon. Despite the minor flash of pain from the wound, Naruto continued with the fight, his healing factor already kicking in to close the small cut. Lifting his left hand, which still held the staff portion of his weapon, the Kyubi Jinchuriki attempted to throw his opponent off balance, the blade of Hai no Ishi singing as it cut through the air in a horizontal swing. Using her smaller stature and flexibility, Cinder was able to crouch just underneath the sword swing and, going with the force of Naruto lifting up the staff still caught under her foot, executed a perfect backflip. She wasn't done there, however, as her bottom half lifted into the air. Her foot smashed into the underside of the whiskered teen's jaw with a resounding crack and a flash of fire, sending Naruto into the far wall. Gracefully swirling her arms around her, her twin blades were consumed in a quick flare only to reveal that she now held a bow of the same gray color as the blades. Notched in the bow were 3 burning arrows, aimed at where Naruto had been sent into the wall. Without even blinking, she let the arrows fly. Instinct screaming at her, Cinder dodged at just the right time to avoid being pummeled by the compressed ball of air that shot out from where she thought Naruto was. Of course, that train of thought was forcibly expelled from her head with Hai no Ishi being buried into her side. A quick glance to the slight dent in the wall showed Cinder the blonde duplicate in the wall going up in a small cloud of smoke, the arrows she had shot flickering out. The Naruto in front of her, who she was sure was the real deal, was breathing heavily, yet showed no real signs of having taken any damage. What really put the raven-haired fighter on edge was the noticeable change in the blonde's eye color. They were still predominantly that easily recognizable shade of blue, but there was a clear amount of crimson beginning to leak in, the whiskers on his cheeks also becoming much more noticeable. He's starting to draw on his Biju's chakra. This isn't good. I need to stop this now or all of Vale will soon be dealing with a very angry Jinchuriki. Again Cinder's thoughts were halted when she felt the cold steel of a blade being held up against her throat, while the blonde who she had thought to be the real deal went up in a cloud of smoke. How do you know about the Biju? Despite the situation and the ease with which her life could very well end in the next few seconds, Cinder found herself grinning. Impressive. So this is what a shinobi is capable of. In turn, Naruto's tone only grew colder as he pressed the edge of his blade further into the still smirking woman's neck, a thin line of blood showing he had cut into the skin. One more chance. If you don't spill it, I'll be spilling your blood. The smirk finally fell from her alabaster cheeks. I had that idiot Roman steal some very old scrolls from a museum for me. In them they spoke of the tailed beasts, monsters of such power that they could bury cities with ease. While that made sense, as, even if the shinobi lifestyle was buried in the sands of time, it was much harder to forget about the 9 monstrously powerful creatures who had once upon a time roamed the lands. Something still wasn't sitting right him. How do you know what a Jinchuriki is? Or what Konoha was? Same way I found out about the Biju. Cinder confessed. Considering that he himself had managed to find a fair few of said scrolls, some even covering some basic jutsu or another, Naruto was hard-pressed to argue. There was also the fact that the knowledge contained in the scrolls could do little else than be just that, knowledge to anyone of this day and age. Anything laying around like that could be opened without the need for chakra more than likely wasn't all that important as well. Still, what bothered him most was that not only did the amber-eyed woman know about the Biju and shinobi, but that she had managed to connect him to it all. It had taken him literally spelling out the truth to his own friends and teammates, people he lived with, for them to connect the dots, and yet this woman had managed to do the same thing with only the knowledge of ages-old scrolls and a few encounters. Why? Why go through all this trouble? Finding those scrolls and books isn't exactly easy, I should know, Naruto asked as he loosened his hold. I need allies I can trust to take care of themselves, Cinder admitted. Fully releasing the woman, Naruto backed away and gazed at the person in front of him as if he were barely seeing her for the first time. Allies for what exactly? Sauntering up to the confused blonde, Cinder smirked as she trailed a finger down his whiskered cheeks, all the while staring straight into his cerulean orbs with her own amber ones. Let's talk about that. Are you sure it was okay to leave Naruto like that? Ruby asked curiously as she made her way back to the port where Beacon students could catch a ride back to campus. Kurama, still wrapped around her shoulders, merely cracked open a single eye. He'll be fine. Kid may be an idiot, but he can take care of himself, and if need be, I can be at his side in a flash. Hearing the confidence the Biju had in the blonde, the young teen decided to take his word for it. The chakra monster had been with Naruto longer than she had and would be far more knowledgeable about where said whiskered teen stood, strength-wise. However, it did bring up a very good question that had been swimming through her head as of late. Though the blue-eyed teen had told them the truth of who he really was, he hadn't really given them the full story of it all, just what he was and how he had ended up in Remnant. Even that had been abridged. Hey, Kurama? The petite teen asked. Taking his following grunt as an acknowledgement, she continued. How long have you and Naruto been together? And how did he even become your, what was it? Jinchuriki, and we've been tied together since he was only a few minutes old. As for how that came to be, it is a long story better saved for when the brat is here. What I can say is that the circumstances that lead to us being bound together is not one of the proudest moments in my existence, Kurama admitted. Looking back at the night that began all of this, the fox was ashamed. He had tried to kill an innocent babe not even an hour old, and regardless of the way he had been treated in the past, to try and do something so horrid was in no way justifiable. His father would have been highly disappointed with him. Shaking himself from such thoughts, he observed the curious look on Ruby's face. Clearly she wasn't satisfied by the answer, but had the decency to not push the matter. Of course, RWBY wasn't exactly the type for silences, so after only a few seconds of nothing being said, she posed another question. So there were 8 other of you Biju, right? Kurama just nodded his head in an affirmative. So were you like siblings or something? Hearing that, the QB instantly had flashbacks to the days long before even the shinobi era, when he and the other tailed beasts attempted to further their father's dream of peace in their own ways. Being that he could sense negative emotions, he had taken it upon himself to snuff out any and all large gatherings of said emotions. Still, despite their many quarrels and differing views, for a time he and the other Biju really had been like siblings. As the ages passed and Hagoromo's 2 sons continued their fight over whose ideal was the true path to peace, the burden of what they were and the festering darkness that began to swallow their world got to them. Shikaku went insane, Matabi hid her hurt behind a perverse facade, Isabu hid himself away from the world, Son Goku and Seiken stayed relatively the same though kept their interactions with humans to minimum. Koko took Isabu's idea and hid himself away, while Komiai busied herself with her forests, and Gyuki became apathetic about the world around him. Eventually he felt the toll as well and ironically gave in to the very anger and rage he had tried so hard to keep from festering. Of course he voiced none of this and instead let out a non-committal grunt. Something like that. So what was Naruto like as a kid? I'd bet he was like the smartest and most talented of his generation and everyone looked up to him, huh? RWBY asked with an excited gleam in her eyes as she conjured up the mental image of a miniature Naruto breathing out fireballs with ease as people cheered. That came crumbling down as Kurama began to uproariously laugh. Ha ha ha, that gaki? Smart? Talented? Ha ha ha, oh that's a good one. The young red-haired teen was left baffled. Sure, Naruto was goofy and more often came off as reckless and ignorant, but from what she had seen, he was equally as powerful and someone with convictions and a will to be admired. It also didn't help that Blake had let it slip that he was the son of his village's leader. In her mind, and no doubt the minds of the others, Naruto was a prodigy, and had been looked at as such. Seeing her confused look, Kurama decided to elaborate. Look, Naruto's childhood is something only he can tell you as that is a rather personal topic. What I will say is this though, it wasn't pretty and he fought tooth and nail to get to where he is now. The Naruto you know now is the result of the blood, sweat, and tears shed from the harsh training he put himself through and the sheer stubbornness to never give up. He wasn't and will never be a prodigy. For a moment, RWBY could do nothing but stare in slight awe at not only what Kurama had said, but how he said it as well. For as long as she had known Naruto and the tailed beast, she had only seen the Biju sleepy, uncaring, or angry, but the sheer conviction and assuredness that he had just used to convey his words was almost like he was stating a scientific fact. Before the silver-eyed teen could ask any more questions, a familiar voice called out, "RWBY!" Turning around, the cloak-wearing teen grinned as she waved at the approaching forms of her teammates and the members of Team NNPR. "Yang, what are you guys doing out here?" "Looking for you and Foxy. We've been wondering where you two were and why you weren't answering any of the messages we sent to your scrolls," the busted blonde exclaimed as she attempted to strangle her younger sister via hugging her. This of course disturbed Kurama's resting spot on the young girl's shoulders, so he quickly vacated and took up a similar post on the only other person he was okay with being around, Pira. When RWBY was finally allowed to gather some much-needed air into her body, she nervously laughed at the inquisitive stare of her sister and friends, all wondering why she hadn't responded to their calls. I may have forgotten it on Naruto's bed. Whoops. Weiss was less than happy about the carelessness of her captain and was more than happy to express that. Forgot it. How could you forget the thing lets us all talk to each other? What if we needed you? Yang, while just as disappointed by her sibling's careless mistake, was not just gonna stand there and let Weiss chew her out, and tried to intervene on her behalf. While Team RWBY descended into bickering with Blake shaking her head off to the side, Pira turned to the kitsune curled around her shoulders. Why hasn't Naruto been answering any of our calls? How to tell her that he's currently dealing with either a possible ally or enemy, one intent on using any means to get him on her side? Kurama pondered. While he would briefly enjoy the trouble caused by his telling Pira just that, in the long run it'd just give him more headaches. Luckily the kitsune was saved from having to explain anything when a grinning Naruto walked up to them with a bored-looking Cinder at his side. Hey guys! What are you guys out here for? Yang was quick to trap her fellow blonde in the now customary headlock. Looking for you. Why weren't you answering any of our messages? Huh! Of course, the whiskered shinobi was unable to respond, with his windpipe being restricted by the bombshell's stranglehold, his face beginning to comically turn blue. Being the more rational of the group, Blake pointed this out to her teammate. Yang. He can't exactly talk with you crushing his throat. Blinking owlishly, the blonde looked down to see a flailing Naruto about to pass out from lack of oxygen. Releasing her hold, she chuckled. Whoops. Hands on his knees, Naruto gasped out. Dear Kami, I thought I was going to die. Thanks, Nico-chan. Part of the Ravenet was childishly miffed at the shinobi's nickname for her, but the predominant part of her was currently busy trying to fight down a blush. Of course, her pale skin tone didn't really help in this endeavor. Luckily for her, the others were distracted by a perversely grinning Kurama's comment. What a way to go though, any? Though he may be dense when it came to matters of the opposite sex, even Naruto was able to catch the not-so-hidden meaning behind the kitsun's comment, a blush heating up his whiskered cheeks. Yang, knowing full well the effect her usual dress coupled with her developed figure had on most males, and some females, above the age of 12, only grinned and was quick to take part in one of her favorite pastimes, teasing Naruto. Does Foxy not like my hugs? Yang mockingly cooed as she held a furiously blushing Naruto to her chest. Due to his current position, the whiskered teen could do little more than sputter, far too embarrassed to actually form a coherent thought. While this was hilarious for most everyone to watch, two certain females found themselves oddly uncomfortable with the sight of Naruto's face buried in Yang's cleavage. Luckily for them, a certain femme fatale decided to intervene and put a stop to the teasing. I'd appreciate it if you didn't try and kill my partner with your jokes. For the first time since she had arrived with their blonde friend, the others took notice of the petite and well-dressed woman who had been silently watching the proceedings. Still holding Naruto to her, Yang raised a brow and greeted the unknown woman with her usual brash attitude. And who are you? Finally managing to free himself from the possibility of death by memories, something which both of his now-deceased senseis would have no doubt admonished him for, Naruto coughed into his hand and took on his usual grin. Guys, meet Cinderfall. Her and a few of her friends will be coming to Beacon in the next few days. Most of the group took well to the news, greeting the Ravenet with smiles. However, Blake and Pyrrha found themselves somewhat put off by the newly introduced woman. Something about her just doesn't sit right with me, the faunus of the group pondered with narrowed eyes. The redhead of Team NPR was uncomfortable for an entirely different reason though. Why did she call Naruto her partner? There's just something about her, and I don't like it. Still, Pyrrha was nothing if not polite and kind to everyone, and so introduced herself with a smile. Pyrrha Nikos, Naruto's partner and second in command. Only a few took note of how the invincible girl introduced herself. Knowing full well that the redhead of Team NPR was crushing on her friend and captain, whether she'd admit it or not, Yang began to snicker. Rubbing her hands together, a mischievous grin made its way onto the brawler's face as she began to plan how to use this for her own entertainment. She wasn't the only one though, a certain kitsune mirroring her thoughts. Oh, this is gonna be interesting. Wonder how I can get that Blake girl involved as well? Ignorant to the scheming of Yang and Kurama, Cinder grinned at Pyrrha, having caught the slight challenge. So you're the invincible girl I've heard so much about. Naruto speaks highly of you. Hearing that had Pyrrha's pale cheeks heating up with a blush. She knew Naruto was quick to say the first thing that came to mind, a quality she found endearing to him, and to hear that he apparently was more than happy to compliment her even when she wasn't around was somewhat embarrassing for her. Cinder was however thinking much differently than that, so this is the famed Pyrrha Nikos. She's bright and talented, I'll give her that, but nothing that can't be dealt with if need be. She may think she's close to him, but I know for a fact he hasn't told them everything. They may be his teammates, but I can offer him something more closure, and to someone like Naruto, that means more than anything. Later that night found Naruto staring up at the moon atop his usual perch, one of the many towers that jutted up from the main building of Beacon. He wasn't alone though, a very quiet Blake having decided to join him in his late-night activities. Naruto himself didn't mind, knowing that the young faunus enjoyed her own peace and quiet, something he needed to better sort out his thoughts. What Cinder had revealed to him earlier in the day had been hard to swallow, even for him, and he had only been in Remnant for almost a year now. That wasn't to say that he cared any less for it, especially now that he had come to accept Vale and more specifically Beacon as his new home. While he was still on the fence on whether or not he would willingly help her cause, he couldn't exactly say he would stop her from continuing what she was doing either. Before he could drown in his thoughts of what-ifs, Blake's voice broke through the night air. Did you lie about being treated badly in your home village? Wide-eyed, Naruto realized that, although he had told them possibly the hardest part of the truth to swallow, he had also confessed to somewhat lying to them, causing them to question what was truth and what was not. To someone like Blake, who had told him some of her most intimate secrets that she hadn't even told to her own teammates yet, this was dangerous territory. If he didn't fess up and set things straight with her, he may very well lose her friendship. No. We Jinchuriki weren't looked at in a good light. At best, we were tools for our villages, a weapon to unleash should the need arise. At worst, we were inhuman, lucky that we were allowed to even breathe the same air as the others of our villages. Most Jinchuriki were chosen specifically at birth for the task. I wasn't so lucky, Naruto admitted with a somber tone to his voice. Raising a brow incuriously, the raven-haired teen urged him to continue. What do you mean? Remember how I said my mom was a faunus? Naruto asked. Seeing the proverbial light bulb go off in her head, he continued. That's right, my mom was Kurama's Jinchuriki before me. Unfortunately, when a female Jinchuriki gives birth, the seal on her weakens slightly, and without proper care, their biju could very well escape. Luckily, my father was a master at Fuinjutsu, and was prepared. Everything went smoothly, at first. When I was born, some masked man somehow managed to find us and threatened my father, saying that if he didn't move away from my mom, he would kill me. Blake could only gasp in horror, imagining how vile a person would have to be to threaten the life of a not even minutes-old newborn. Taking his hand through his hair, the whiskered shinobi continued. Of course, my father wasn't called the Kiroi Senko for nothing. Unfortunately, he wasn't fast enough and Kurama was freed. The man was able to control him and sent Fuzzball into a rage, leaving the strongest of the biju to wreak havoc on Konoha. Eventually my parents managed to get the man to flee, however Kurama was still rampaging throughout the leaf. My dad did the only thing he could think of and used what is known as the Shiki Fujin. The teen faunus took a moment to do the translation in her head. Dead demon consuming seal. Naruto nodded his head. It's a powerful summoning technique that allowed the user to summon the Shinigami, who would then either take the target's soul or seal it into something, at the price of the user's own soul. My dad used this to seal Kurama into me. Because of this, my dad was damned to eternally rot in the stomach of the Shinigami, while my mom had suffered far too many wounds after having Kurama forcefully taken from her, something that would kill most other Jinchuriki. So in essence, you were a hero. You were given the task of holding back the biju who had almost destroyed your home. Blake surmised. Shaking his head in sadness, the blonde teen sighed. You and I both know that most people aren't exactly accepting of something different from them. To the villagers who did not understand the intricacies of Fuinjutsu, I was no longer just a kid, but the tailed beast that had almost destroyed their home and taken the lives of their loved ones. To others I was a walking time bomb, a fragile cage that would eventually break and unleash Kurama again. Having been a victim of the harsh prejudice against the faunus people, Blake could not disagree and only grew depressed as she realized the full scope of the life Naruto had been forced to live. An orphan at birth, no family, and ostracized by his own home for something he had no say in. Still though, one thing seemed to bug her. But how could they treat the son of their village leader like that? How could they hate the son and love the father? Like I told you before, no one except a small handful of people even knew I was his son. My father was an S-rank shinobi who had slaughtered an entire battalion of enemy Nin in the blink of an eye. Suffice it to say, he wasn't well liked by those other villages, and announcing that I was his son was pretty much like painting a big red target on my back for them. Naruto elaborated. While she wasn't exactly happy about the situation, Blake realized there was nothing she could do about it. It had happened centuries ago, and Naruto seemed to have come to terms with it. That didn't make any more okay though, and the frown etched into the Ravenette's pale complexion said as much. However, the curiosity in her was pushing her to ask one last question. How bad was it? The Jinchuriki wasn't exactly surprised by the question and had actually been expecting it. He also realized that anything bar the absolute truth wouldn't satisfy the cat faunus. Didn't make it any easier to talk about though. I grew up in the orphanage. The matrons would tell the other kids to stay away from me and would only feed me because they had to. When I was 4, I was kicked out, the matrons saying I was old enough to fend for myself. I spent a year on the streets scrounging for food. Most places refused to serve me, and those that did either jacked up the prices or gave me rotten food. Anytime I tried to play with other kids, their parents would take them away, telling them to stay away from me, that I was a demon. When I was 5, the Sandaime Hokage found me in an alley. He gave me my own apartment and a stipend to pay for anything I would need. Still nothing changed. The adults who had been around during Kurama's attack saw me as a demon, and their kids followed the example and stayed as far from me as was possible. As Naruto kept going, Blake could only grow angrier and angrier. Her hands clenched into fists as her entire body shook in rage at the idea of an entire village treating a single child, a toddler no less, like he was a leper. It not only exactly mirrored the strife that Faunus had to deal with on a daily basis, but it was actually worse for her blonde friend. The Faunus stood as a united group. They fought for their rights and knew that even if they were treated like shit by the majority of the populace, they still had their family, they still had other Faunus to go to. Naruto had no one and was forced to weather the prejudice alone. More than anything though, she was angry at herself for doubting the whiskered teen. He had been nothing but kind to her and treated her not as a Faunus or even as a huntress, but as Blake Belladonna. True, he had kept some secrets and not told the entire truth, but he didn't do it with bad intent. It was just the opposite really. He had done it out of his own uneasiness and his want to protect them from the shock of having such a huge bomb dropped on them. Despite his childhood, despite the hurdles he had to overcome, at his core, Naruto Uzumaki was a caring soul and she had doubted that. I'm sorry. That was something not even he had expected. Outrage at how he was treated? Sure. But for her to apologize? Not at all. What left the blonde even more stumped was the reason for the apology. Blake hadn't done him any wrong as far as he knew, so in his mind there was no reason for her to be apologizing. Sorry for what? It's not like any of it was your fault. In response, the ex-White Fang member shook her head. No, I'm sorry for doubting you. It's just, after you said you hadn't been entirely truthful, I started questioning everything. I felt like you had betrayed my trust, and that hurt. But I've realized you never gave me a reason for that. You've been nothing but sincere, even if you weren't telling the whole story. So I'm sorry for doubting you, Naruto. What happened next took Blake by surprise. Naruto wrapped his arms tightly around her, engulfing her smaller form in a warm hug. Of course, she was far from being used to such random acts of affection from the opposite gender and blushed heavily. What he said next only darkened that blush. Silly Nico-chan, you don't have to apologize for that. I know what it's like to trust someone and then have them spit on it in return. I can't blame you for something that is really my own fault. So no more apologies or anything. While it wasn't exactly a chilly night out, for some reason as Naruto began to unwrap his arms from around her, she felt like she had just lost the most comfortable blanket ever. With a heavy blush, Blake hurriedly wrapped her own arms around his back and buried her face into his chest, mumbling. Is it okay if we stay like this? It's kinda cold. Now it was Naruto's turn to blush. He had originally meant to hug the young Faunus as a gesture of friendship and to console her. However, with her face buried in his shirt and the smell of her hair, a subtle flowery scent, wafting into his nose, Naruto realized the position they were in. Dense he may be, but even he realized that they looked like a couple embracing. Oddly, this triggered a thought process similar to the one he had when the old lady who ran the coffee shop they had went to had mistakenly called them a couple. Blake Belladonna was a beautiful young woman. Her long pitch black hair was soft, something he only now noticed with it tickling his chin, and held that pleasant smell to it. Her alabaster skin was smooth to the touch again, something he only now noticed with his arms wrapped around her, and sent a pleasant shock into him every time he grazed her bare arms. What struck him though was the feel of their current position. Growing up as the village pariah had left him severely stunted in the displays of love and affection department, and it hadn't been until he had grown closer to Tsunade and her apprentice Shizen the former who had begun to take on a distinctly motherly role in his life, while the latter was the elder sister, that he had begun to receive the kinds of hugs and affectionate displays that most children received growing up. Tsunade had particularly taken to placing soft kisses on his forehead in a show of her love for him, and despite his age, he had welcomed them. Shizen was all too happy to accept his hugs and even return them. But that was a familial love. This close and intimate hug he was in was very different. Sure, there was still that welcoming surge of warmth and contentment, but considering it was coming from a very attractive female his own age, someone he connected to rather well despite their personality differences, marked this hug as different. Then came the ideas, the mental images of them, he and Blake as a couple, and Naruto found himself hard-pressed to say the thought wasn't pleasing. He was no longer the boy who yearned for any kind of attention, but a teen who had been through hell and now found himself in a place where he could settle down and really make a life for himself without the threat of some megalomaniac coming after him for the tailed beast in his gut. Blake was meanwhile busy with her own thoughts, her mind racing to figure out why she was blushing and why she had even asked for this in the first place. She was no stranger to the concept of love, or even sexual attraction, but to her it was a foreign thought. She had done such horrendous things while in the White Fang, and despite having come to terms with those actions, Naruto having helped her in that endeavor, she still didn't think she was worthy of it. She who ran from her precious life. She who ran from who and what she was. She who was still trying to run from that life. In Blake's mind, she didn't deserve the happiness and joy that came with falling in love, let alone falling in love with one Naruto Uzumaki who seemed to be a pillar for all things good. While they shared many similarities, mainly their backgrounds as outcasts and killers, they were also opposites. She had run from her responsibilities and tried to distance herself from that life, never wanting to get any closer to others in a bid to save herself. The blonde Jinchuriki, however, accepted who and what he was wholeheartedly. Not only that, but he was the type of person to do what he thought was right regardless of what anyone else thought. Most of all, he seemed to have a hero complex, coming to the aid of any and all who needed it, whether they wanted it or not. Case in point, the RWBY and Weiss issue that could have very well ended with Team RWBY either being disbanded or worse. Yet he had stepped in and knocked some sense into the Schnee heiress, all because he didn't want to see his friends go down that route. Then there was the whole Carden mess. They had all sat there and stared in disgust at what Carden was doing, yet it had been Naruto who had actually tried to do something about it, not even caring that he had never once met Velvet. Sure, she knew he wasn't perfect. More often than not he was brash, loud, cocky, and far too stubborn, but those were actually endearing to him. Those qualities coupled with his past and heart of gold made him who he was. As Blake pondered on all this, something clicked. The feelings of jealousy that surfaced any time she heard the rumors of him and Pira being together. The unease she felt every time she saw Yang or Coco tease him. The feeling of warmth she got any time she was near him. It all finally clicked. I'm falling for him. Far too wrapped up in their own thoughts, the two failed to hear the approaching steps that began to grow louder and louder. As the two gazed into the other's eyes, the door to the stairwell that led up to the roof slammed open, shoving them out of their own reverie. Wide-eyed and blushing, yet still holding the other, Blake and Naruto turned to see their teammates staring slack-jawed at them. Yan was the fastest to recover and grinned with her hands in her hips. Well, so this is what you two are up to when you're alone. I gotta say, I never took you for that kind of girl, Blake. Yang! RWBY attempted to scold her sister for teasing the two, though the heavy blush that stained her cheeks only made it look comical. Nora turned to Rem, who stood at her side, a slight blush dusting his own cheeks, and bluntly asked, Hey Ren? Do you think that if Blake and Naruto had kids, they'd have whisker marks and be awesome magicians too? The random question was enough to break the camel's back. Yang sent to the floor rolling in laughter as Blake and Naruto finally parted as if they had been burned by the other. RWBY, Ren, and Weiss all looked away with a blush, embarrassed that they had intruded on what they thought was an intimate moment for their friend and teammates. However, one person did not laugh, nor was she blushing in embarrassment. Pira stood stock still, the image of Blake held in Naruto's arms as they gazed at each other like a couple burned into her mind. For a reason she couldn't fathom, it felt like a knot had just formed in the pit of stomach, unknown feelings of jealousy rising to the surface. Why was she jealous though? Blake was a beautiful and intelligent girl. Even she could see that. And yet still the thought of her and Naruto together unsettled her. Why did she want Blake to stay as far away from Naruto as possible? Why was she suddenly angry at herself for waiting? Waiting for what? Naruto was her friend, she should be happy that he had found a girl to make him happy. And yet she wasn't. Just the opposite. I don't want him to be with another girl. I want him to be with me. Make number 1, how Jiraiya tricked Naruto into losing his virginity. Naruto Uzumaki was many things. Lucky beyond reason, loyal to a fault, and a general ball of sunshine to those he considered his precious people. One thing he was not was patient. Months into the 2-year training trip he had been sent on with his mentor, Jiraiya of the Sannin, and the perv had only begun to teach him how to recognize and break out of genjutsu, illusionary techniques, and how to better control the stupid fuzzball's chakra. Even that had been slow going though. The lecher had the nerve to only show him the basics, and then he was off gallivanting with some prostitute, or peeping on some poor hot spring in whatever village they happened to be staying in. I swear, I'm gonna send a message to Bachan, Granny, and tell her how Erosenin, pervy sage, isn't even teaching me anything. Then she'll beat his ass and then maybe he'll teach me, Tebeo. A young Naruto declared to himself. Before he could put his grand plan into action though, a certain peeping shinobi of fame, and infamy, appeared in a flurry of leaves in front of his young apprentice, with several bright red slap marks dotting his bruised face. Where the hell have you been, Erosenin? I thought you were supposed to be teaching me some super cool jutsu so I can go rescue Sasuke. It may have been the pounding he had taken from the women who had caught him peeking that rattled his brain, or the hangover from a night of partying at the local brothel, probably both dash. But after hearing almost exactly the same thing hollered at him from his young charge, Jiraiya was at his wits' end. I don't remember Minato being as loud as this Gaki. Then again, he may look like him, but the kid sure as hell has got his mother's attitude. Maybe I should tell him about them already? Looking down, the Toad Sage could only sigh upon the sight of a still ranting Naruto trying to verbally tear him a new one. Nope, definitely not ready. Man, if only he would get laid, maybe then he'd realize why the female body is so majestic. Wait, that's it. Standing tall, Jiraiya coughed into his fist to get the attention of a fuming Naruto. Seeing that he had done just that, the powerful shinobi continued. Well, Gaki, I was actually out preparing for the latest thing I'm gonna teach you. Naruto's mood did an instant 180, and he was soon grinning widely at his mentor. Really? What is it? Is it some super awesome katan jutsu? Or how about the shunshin? Grinning at the genius of his own plan, Jiraiya shook his head. No, it's something integral in being my apprentice. You don't know this, but I am Konoha's foremost spy master and am crucial in making sure that the Hokage is up to speed on the going-ons of all the other villages. I have spies everywhere. Even some in other hidden villages like Kumo and IWA. Hearing the way the old pervert phrased it made it seem like one of the most vital and dangerous jobs in Konoha, bar being the Hokage of course. At the ripe age of 13 and still somewhat naive to the way the world worked, Naruto bought into it, and stared at his sensei with awe. That's so cool! Are you going to teach me how to interrogate someone like that Ibiki dude? Or some super cool sneaky jutsu that makes you invisible? Seeing his plan already working, the Toad Summoner had to hold in the evil cackle that would have made even his twisted and demented former teammate Orochimaru shed a tear in pride. I warn you, Gaki, this training will be harsh. You will be far more tired than you would have ever thought was possible. This only served to excite the young blonde even more. I'm ready, Erosenin. Off we go then, my young apprentice. Gripping the shorter teen's shoulder, the two disappeared in a flurry of leaves. Naruto was left dumbfounded when he, instead of some high-tech training ground or cell, he was instead sitting on a rather comfy and plush king-sized bed with several candles laying around, serving as the only source of light. What raised the weirdness bar even higher was the beautiful and scantily dressed female who walked into the room with a predatory grin on her face, staring him down like he was a piece of meat. He began to back up on the bed frantically as she sauntered to him, that look only growing stronger as she licked her lips. Panic set in when the Jinchuriki felt his back hit the headboard of the bed. Left with nowhere to go, he began to sweat as the scary woman, as he dubbed her, crawled her way up the bed. One hand on the side of us against the headboard and her legs trapping his own between hers, while a well-manicured nail raked across one of his whisker marks, the lady breathed out. Don't worry, my specialty is popping cherries. I've never encountered a Jinchuriki before, but your sensei says you have lots of stamina. Let's see if that translates into the bedroom as well. On the other side of the bedroom door, a cackling Jiraiya furiously began to scribble in his little notepad as the sounds of panic began to morph into grunts and groans. The Gaki's a gold mine. Why didn't I do this before? A quick flash of the Kyuubi's chakra however set his instincts on edge and Jiraiya was up in his feet in an instant, ready to kick down the door with a grim look on his face, his writing forgotten. Of course that changed however when, instead of screams of pain or horror, a very different kind of scream breached the walls of the room. Oh my Kami, yes! Just like that. Jiraiya was propelled backwards as a jet stream of blood furiously poured out of his nostrils. A wide grin stretched across the old pervert's face as the sound of a bed slamming into the walls and more screams of pleasure bounced off the walls of the brothel. Best idea. Ever. The day following that saw Naruto doing his best to imitate a tomato whilst hiding in his jacket as a noticeably limping woman enthusiastically waved a goodbye. Jiraiya himself could not stop grinning like a fool as he flipped through several notebooks full of writing. Gaki, I will teach you any jutsu you want as long as you let me manage you. Damn it, Yaro-senin, I am not letting you pimp me out. But Naruto! A few more times and we'll never have to work a day in our lives. No. But. Stop asking. Come on. Pretty please. Senin Goroshi. Chapter 13. Monday morning was shaping up to be the first rather normal day Team NNPR, especially Naruto, had in a rather long while. For some this would be a welcome change to the roller coaster that had been their lives since arriving at Beacon. Of course Naruto Uzumaki didn't really do normal. It's not that he enjoyed all the drama and trouble that he usually found himself involved with, but he also wasn't exactly fan of sitting in a chair as Professor Port rambled on about some other adventure of his either. His only solace was that it thankfully gave him ample time to think. The whiskered teen was especially grateful for this when he thought about the strange way his red-headed teammate and the faunus of Team RWBY had been acting when around him. Both had been making it a point to spend more time with him, alone usually, and had taken to hugging him, or even invading his personal space bubble quite often. And honestly it baffled him. He and Pyrrha had grown comfortable enough with each other to not really mind the occasional brush of skin or such, but she seemed like she was now actively trying to initiate such moments. Blake's recent actions were even more confusing to him. He knew he was one of the few, her team included, that the usually reserved teen would actively associate with, but she had gone from occasionally going to the library with him to spending almost as much time with him as Pyrrha did, a drastic change if there ever was one. Not that he was really complaining. He rather enjoyed spending time with both of them, and after that night on the rooftop, he found himself wanting to spend more and more time with Blake. Naruto was torn from his inner thoughts when he noticed everyone packing up their things and getting ready for whatever class was next. This made the whiskered blonde especially happy when he realized that since today was Monday, he and his team had battle class with Glinda next. Stretching in his seat, Naruto grinned. Ah, feels good to stretch after being in that chair for so long, Tibeo. Next to him, Pyrrha let out a giggle. You say that every day, Naruto. The blonde pouted. Not my fault, Port is so boring. Did he even actually get to anything in the book? Ren sighed and shook his head as he got up from his own seat. I'm inclined to agree with our captain here. Professor Port is lacking in certain teaching aspects. Nora chose this time to jump from her own desk and her nap. No. We have to save the Pancake Prince from the Waffle Invaders. Luckily all but a few people had vacated the lecture hall, and those that were left were already used to the odd antics of the hammer wielder. Team NNPR just shook their heads at their eccentric teammate as they made their way to the practice arena where Glinda held her classes. Today was an especially good day in Naruto's books, because it was their once-a-week practical where they would be asked to fight under some sort of condition, be it with a handicap or with a certain goal to aim for. It was these practicals where Naruto's past profession left him head and shoulders above almost the entirety of Beacon. Then again, most of the students would never have to deal with pedophilic snakes with an unhealthy love for young boys, a megalomaniac Uchiha bent on world domination, and the countless other dangers of the shinobi era. Geez, I really was a danger magnet, Naruto realized with a sweat drop. Kurama butted in with a snide remark, was? You still are a danger magnet, or did you forget about the dangerous vixen who is actually now only 2 feet from you? Shaking himself from his thoughts, Naruto realized what his partner meant, Cinder standing there with her arms crossed in the standard Beacon Academy uniform. To her left was a visibly irritated Emerald while that silver-haired guy whose name he didn't know stood to her side. The whiskered teen's attention was brought elsewhere when he felt someone in his own personal space bubble, having gotten there without him even noticing. Turning around he found a certain fun-sized teen standing there with that adorable, yet dangerous, smile on her face. Seeing her there, silently gazing up at him with her heterochromic eyes sent a shiver up his spine and he couldn't help but let out a yelp as he jumped away from her and hid behind Ren. Seeing their captain, someone who they knew to have faced countless dangers head-on, be so frightened by the adorable teen sent laughs through Team NNPR, and even those alongside Cinder were chuckling. In return, Naruto pouted childishly. She just surprised me, that's all. Surprisingly, Neo's face shifted from far too adorable to looking like she was about to cry any second. Naruto may have the guts and stupidity to face down the Kyubi no Kitsune and call it a fuzzball, but not even he could fight against the heart-wrenching sight of an adorable girl on the verge of bawling her eyes out. And so, against his better judgment, Naruto conceded and engulfed Neo in a hug. The petite pink/brown-haired girl instantly went from sad to happy as she returned the hug and nuzzled into the taller teen's abdomen, a sight which had even Cinder mentally admitting that the sight was far too cute. It was at this moment that Glinda made herself known. "Good morning. It's been long enough that I believe you all know how this works by now. Today we will be having our practical. The handicap for the matches will be that you are only allowed to use your weapon and hand-to-hand skills. No aura or semblance use will be permitted. The reason for this is that you will occasionally find yourself in situations where you either need to conserve your aura or be completely cut off from it. As such, we will see how you all fare without it, and the rest of this week will be aimed at working to fix any holes in your style." While Naruto could definitely see the merit of such a training plan, he had to admit it was a moot point for him. As an Uzumaki Jinchuriki, he could toss out S-rank jutsu for a few hours, and that wasn't even taking into account Kurama's chakra that he could draw on at any time. The likelihood of him running low on chakra was all but nil. Still, he had to admit that he could use the practice. His little bout with Cinder had shown him just how much of gap there was between him and veteran huntsmen and huntresses. Sure, he could easily bridge that gap and then outpace them with chakra, but as a huntsman, well, his skills were severely lacking. For today, each of you will be randomly paired with a partner. Pairs will then spar with myself and several other professors overseeing the matches. Afterwards you will be free to clean yourselves and go about with your days. Understood? Good, then we will begin with the pairings. If I say your name, step up and wait for your partner to be announced. Afterwards you will be taken to another area for your matches. Glinda intoned in her usual no-nonsense voice. Names were quickly being called as some sort of small screen next to the blonde deputy headmistress displayed them. Ren was the first of the people he knew to be called up and was paired with some random guy who Naruto didn't care for. Emerald followed not too long after, and was again placed against some no-name. The only male on Cinder's team was paired with some rather attractive brunette, who wielded what looked to be a pair of short swords. Nora was paired with yet another person who Naruto knew nothing about. Finally, Pira's name came up and he offered her a cheesy grin and thumbs up. The redhead only giggled before walking to stand next to the screen, waiting for her partner. The name that flashed on the screen, however, had Naruto's smile instantly falling off his face. Cinderfall of Team CMNE, Carmine, step up. The Ravenette was stopped from doing so when a harsh grip around her upper arm halted her. A feeling of malice and hatred soon began to permeate the air around her, sending her body on high alert as it was drowned in the suffocating miasma. A breath on the back of her neck sent chills down her spine as Naruto's voice, far more gravelly than it usually was, whispered in her ear. "I may not be able to argue against your cause, but if you do anything to hurt Pira, I will show you why we Jinchuriki were used as deterrents for war." Cinder's peripheral vision allowed her to see that Naruto's normally bright blue eyes were now twin pools of ruby red, his whisker marks far more noticeable. The scrolls she had found had painted Jinchuriki and their Biju as instruments of death and destruction, capable of equaling an army by themselves. However, she was now highly aware of how big of a gap there was between that knowledge and actually experiencing the feeling of being so close to such a powerful entity. This, the feeling of death that now lingered around her as Naruto, Jinchuriki to the most powerful of the nine, let loose some of that power, was indescribable. It made her feel small, weak, and beyond frightened. Under this suffocating pressure, she wasn't a trained huntress who could easily frighten notorious criminal masterminds or kill even Elder Grimm. No, she was a small child staring down something far worse than the boogeyman. However, as soon as the feeling came, it was gone, Naruto once more the grinning and waving at his curious teammate. Cinder took the time to resume her usual facade and walked up to join Pira. She wasn't there mentally though, her mind far too absorbed in her thoughts. It had been a long while since Cinderfall had felt such a primal fear. It wasn't the fear of the rational brain. No, it spoke to that instinctual part of her, a remnant of her ancestors who had been around when the Biju were free to roam the earth. It was the fear that a little mouse felt when the eyes of an owl were on it. The fear of a prey when in the presence of a creature far further up on the food chain than it. And she couldn't help the thrill that shot up her spine as she remembered that feeling. She was by no means a masochist, but to know that there was someone with the power and ability to strip her bare, leave her feeling as vulnerable as a newborn child was refreshing. Sure, she held no doubts that there were surely people and forces out there that could defeat her, but she was also confident in her ability to make them work for it. Naruto made it clear that he could and would very well unleash the full might of his Biju, a living force of nature capable of leveling the entirety of Remnant if allowed to do so, should she step out of bounds. And if there was one thing most new about Cinder, it was that she respected power and more so those with the confidence to truly put that power to use. Naruto's display had shown he had both in spades. I will have you as an ally, Naruto Uzumaki, and I will do anything to get what I want, anything, Cinder swore to herself. Soon after, a rather frazzled green-haired Professor Oblek showed up and escorted the two females to wherever it was they would be fighting. More names were called, and as the numbers whittled down, Naruto had a sinking feeling in his gut. Please don't be who I think it is, please don't be who I think it is, please don't. Naruto's mantra was interrupted by Glinda's voice. Neopolition of Team CMNE. Your partner will be Naruto Uzumaki of Team NNPR. The sound of something hitting a wall drew everyone's attention. The sight of a cursing blonde bashing his head into the wall repeatedly had the other students and teachers still left wondering just how sane the leader of Team NNPR was. If you're done, Mr. Uzumaki, both myself and Ms. Neopolition would like to be going now. Glinda intoned, seemingly unfazed by the oddity of the situation. Then again, she was friends with Ojban, so that had to say something of her tolerance of eccentric people. Face still firmly planted in the wall, Naruto only grumbled something unintelligible in response. Well, Ms. Nikos, Ms. Fall, you know the rules and such. I will step in if I feel the need to proceed, Oblek stated evenly. Dressed in their battle wear, Cinder in her maroon dress and Pyrrha in her gold and red gear, the two females raised a brow at the nonchalance that their professor just displayed. Shrugging it off, the two stared each other down, Pyrrha grabbing Milo and Akko. Her opponent, however, simply stood there with her arms crossed. Aren't you gonna bring out your weapon? The redhead asked curiously. Cinder raised an eyebrow before responding. I won't be needing it. Normally Pyrrha didn't much care for things like pride, seeing it as a hindrance. However, the casual ease with which her opponent had pretty much declared, I am far better than you and won't even need a weapon to beat you, had her tightening her grip on Milo. While she knew that despite her title, she was far from being invincible, she was also confident enough to know that she was above average in combat. Really, barring her captain, she was probably the strongest of their year and possibly a few years ahead as well. And she was confident in this, because she knew how much effort she put into training herself to get there, especially in recent weeks with Naruto helping her to improve. In one sentence, Cinder had spit on all that hard work, and Pyrrha took that as saying all the work she and her closest friend had done was all for naught. Narrowing her eyes and tightening her stance, Pyrrha bit out, Very well then. Let's begin. In a burst of speed, the red-headed Greco-Roman-themed warrior was sprinting across the field, her gold and red spear shifting into a short sword as she gave a horizontal swing at Cinder. The smaller female casually dodged the sword swing, a mocking smirk on her face. This only served to further ignite the fire that had been lit in Pyrrha as she attempted to ram Akko forcefully into Cinder's face, intent on knocking that smirk off her face. In a show of skill and acrobatics, the amber-eyed woman jumped into the air and landed on the shield as Pyrrha pushed it forward, sending Cinder into a backflip. Coming out of her little aerial maneuver, the older of the two was forced to quickly dodge to the side as Milo came sailing straight at her, embedding itself into the earth. Slightly surprised, Cinder realized where the redhead had been aiming. If I hadn't moved when I did, she would have skewered me straight through my abdomen. She is actually trying to harm me. Interesting. Pyrrha was meanwhile not exactly happy that she had missed. Despite what some may think, she didn't use her semblance to help her aim when throwing either of her weapons. No, it was through tireless hours upon hours of practice that had given her the aim of a true marksman. An aim she was putting to use as she hurled her shield at her opponent with deadly force. Cinder easily dodged the shield, but was severely unprepared for the fist that came crashing into her abdomen with enough power to rob her lungs of air. Pyrrha may not be the most physically powerful of her teammates, nor taking that title, but that didn't mean she couldn't pack quite the wallop. The redhead was quick to press her advantage though, quickly reaching for Milo, which she attempted to skewer her opponent straight through with. The split second that Pyrrha had taken to grab her weapon from the ground had given Cinder enough time to recover. Her smirk now gone, dodging to the side of the stab, the amber-eyed woman grabbed the shaft of Milo and pulled, bringing her aqua-eyed sparring partner into her waiting fist. Pyrrha took the hit with a grimace and was ready to counter, but was unprepared for the elbow that slammed into her jaw, sending her to the floor. The maroon-garbed woman stomped on Milo, effectively pinning it to the ground. Gaining back her bearings, the Team NPR member was forced to relinquish her hold on her weapon so she could roll to the side and avoid having Cinder's heels meet her face. However, this meant that she was now weaponless, a fact Cinder was quick to capitalize on as she quickly used her foot to easily toss Milo into her hands. While Pyrrha was the only one capable of switching her weapon into its 3 different forms, the Ravenet was quick to show her proficiency in weapons combat, charging forward with surprising speed for someone in heels and a dress. Pyrrha was quick to dodge the first stab, but was unable to do so again when her opponent easily twirled the spear and sent the butt of it barreling into her solar plexus. The laws of motion took hold and the redhead was sent tumbling across the grassy field like a pebble skipping across a lake. Dazed from her impromptu trip, the taller teen rolled to her feet and was just barely able to dodge the follow-up slash from her own weapon, coming away with a small cut on her upper right arm. Cinder, however, was intent on pressing her advantage, swiftly coming around with another stab. Having gained back some semblance of balance, Pyrrha was quick to roll to the side. Twirling her pilfered javelin around, Cinder lunged forward with yet another attempt at a stab. However, unlike the previous attempts, this one looked like it would actually land, the two now being only a few feet apart at best, leaving Professor Oblek ready to intervene if Pyrrha couldn't counter it. However, both Cinder and Oblek were surprised when Pyrrha ducked down and grabbed her shield that had been thrown a while ago. Akko in hand, the redhead met the stab head-on, sparks flying as the head of Milo met the bronze surface of its partner, and was sent careening upwards. Having been unprepared for the sudden change in direction of the weapon she was using, the petite woman lost her footing and sense of balance, allowing her opponent the chance to deliver a devastating kick to her abdomen. Now it was Cinder's turn to be sent across the field in an unceremonious manner. By the time she had come to a full stop, Pyrrha was above the older woman with Milo now in its rifle form, barrel aimed straight at the raven-haired woman's head. "Yield," was the redhead's curt statement. While Cinder gave no verbal response, the smirk that grew on her face had Pyrrha tensing in preparation. Even still, she was unprepared for her opponent to sweep her legs out from under her, pulling the trigger in sheer instinct. The bullet was just inches past alabaster cheeks, amber orbs unflinching as she fluidly reversed their position. Oblek nodded his head, seeing that the match had been finally decided. With her heel grinding into the down second in command of Team NPR and Milo's barrel now aimed at its owner, the leader of Team CMNE had successfully put her opponent into an unwinnable situation. Not only that, it was clear that they were both coming close to running on fumes. "Well, I'd say that you are the winner of this spar, Ms. Fall. Now if you would please give Ms. Nikos her weapon back, please?" Cinder stepped back and allowed Pyrrha to shakily get on her feet before carelessly tossing Milo back to her. Despite her wounds and all, the aqua-eyed teen was still easily able to catch her weapon and settle it on her back. Looking at the two, Oblek had to internally question if he had allowed the spar to go on for too long. The bruises they would no doubt have wouldn't be just superficial wounds. No, they were bound to have a few bruised bones as well as possibly a concussion, especially Pyrrha, having suffered far more blows to the cranium. Still, he was a teacher and had to explain to them the reason for all this. "And what have you learned from this?" Caught off guard, and still reeling from their spar, neither could properly answer the question. However, as the aches in her body became more prominent, Pyrrha came to a realization. "We're more hurt and tired than we would be if we had been allowed to use our aura." Oblek nodded quickly. "Very good, Ms. Nikos. Yes, aura is a magnificent thing that allows us to perform feats some may consider superhuman. However, these feats are not all flashy uses of one's semblance. Whether consciously or not, we huntsmen use our aura to not just empower our body so that we can deliver far stronger strikes, but to also be able to withstand far more damage and still continue fighting. Our bodies also naturally use our aura to heal us. Nothing astounding like fixing broken bones, but small cuts, bruises, and even aches from overworking are rather easily healed when we give our body the necessary time to rest." Realizing that their auras did indeed speed up their body's natural healing process, a shared thought popped into their minds. How is Naruto able to heal so quickly? Does it have to do with him being a Jinchuriki? Before they could further ponder their blonde friend's unnaturally fast healing factor, the green-haired professor continued. "Now, I would highly recommend you both do just that. I believe there is still a half hour before your next classes, so take advantage of it. Goodbye." And like that, the oddball of a teacher was gone, leaving the two alone. Turning, Pyrrha was ready to offer the proverbial olive branch and even thank her opponent for a good spar, but was surprised to find that Cinder was already waltzing off, not even caring if Pyrrha would be able to make it back to the school. Sighing, the redhead was ready to use Milo as a makeshift walking stick, her body now aching more than ever as the adrenaline wore off, but was deeply surprised when a certain kitsune appeared via a small flash of flames. "Kurama?" The kitsune merely grunted. "Gaki was worried something like this would happen, so he sent me to come get you. Don't know why he didn't send a clone, but whatever." A quick use of his chakra and the Kyuubi went from being an adorable kit to a rather menacing-looking fox the size of a horse. Body throbbing in pain, Pyrrha couldn't argue and was all too happy to throw herself onto the soft fur of her captain's Biju partner. Her last thoughts before sleep took her were of her closest friend. "I wonder how Naruto is doing with his spar?" Naruto allowed a grimace to cross his cheeks as Neo's foot once more found its way into his abdomen, cracking yet another of his ribs at the same time. "Okay, so maybe I need a bit more practice with this whole not using chakra thing." Twirling high no Ishi, the blonde parried a strike from his petite opponent, but was caught off guard when she opened her parasol and used the curve of it to direct him and his weapon away. Twirling like a dancer, the diminutive girl buried the top of her foot into Naruto's side. Despite the power behind the kick, the taller teen managed to hold his ground, though he was beginning to wonder if Neo knew he had a healing factor and was being so brutal as a way to get back at him for what he'd done to her in the club when they first met. Looking at said ice cream-themed girl casually standing across from him with that beyond sweet smile of hers, it was very much so possible. Feeling his ribs snap back into place, again, Naruto stood to his full height. "Alright, enough of this. Time to stop fooling around. Bachan would smack me around if she knew I wasn't doing my hardest to improve here." It was Neo's turn to be caught off guard when her opponent looked to phase out of existence. Any thoughts she had on him using his semblance or aura were quickly put to the back of her mind when she felt the air leave her lungs. The laws of motion were perfectly exemplified when the small girl was sent flying through the air by the same hit that had robbed her of her oxygen. Naruto wasn't done there, following up the attack by appearing below her and grabbing her legs, bringing her to a harsh and jarring stop. Using the momentum from her impromptu flight, the blonde savagely plowed her into the ground. Neo was quick to retaliate, forcibly freeing one of her legs from her opponent's grasp and proceeded to drive the bottom of her foot straight into the Jinchuriki's face with the brutal sound of bones snapping echoing around the vacant field. Using her arms, the smaller teen pushed herself up and plowed her umbrella into the dazed blonde's side. Naruto took the hit without too much issue, instead taking the chance to come back at his opponent with a punch, only to have said teen redirect his arm with her parasol. Twirling high no Ishi with his other hand, the blonde spun around, aiming the top of the staff at Neo's lower half. The petite girl jumped into the air over the sweep and landed with a handstand, Naruto's shoulders serving as her landing place. Like a pendulum, she swung back around and shoved both her feet into Naruto's back. Getting back up, the Jinchuriki attempted to catch Neo off guard with a burst of speed, however she was now prepared for just such a rush, easily twirling out of the way of the first strike. The second strike was directed away by an upward palm thrust to his upper arm. A swing from his Shikujo was shoved to the side by a quick opening of her parasol. Neo's follow-up was a kick to the face. The pink/brown-haired teen proceeded to cartwheel out of the way as Naruto attempted an axe kick that hit the ground with enough force to create a small crater. Hidden by the small cloud of dust and debris that had been kicked up, the blonde shinobi reached to his side and palmed a handful of shuriken in each hand. A casual toss and they were sent singing through the air. Raising an eyebrow at the change of tactics and choice of weaponry, Neo gave a mental shrug before opening her parasol and casually deflected the throwing stars. She was able to just as easily swing her weapon around and divert the kick aimed at her head. Widening her stance, she swung her upper body underneath the sweeping overhead kick that soon followed. The very agile teen proceeded to spin out of the way of Naruto's punch, ending up back-to-back with the taller teen. For a second neither moved, Naruto holding his position with high no Ishi held in his right hand while Neo did the same, her parasol lying nonchalantly across her shoulder and crossing into his peripheral vision. The quick respite was over as soon as it came, Naruto once more going on the offensive as Neo dodged and countered in a flurry of twirls and spins. Off to the sides, an astonished Glinda could do nothing more than stare. This was not a battle between two first-year students, no, this was a fight between two highly trained and experienced warriors. It was clear that Neopolitan was far more skilled with her choice of style, but what Naruto lacked in skill and finesse he more than made up for with sheer tenacity and durability. The blonde deputy headmistress could only imagine what a battle where they could use their respective aura and semblance would be like. However, despite her shock of how skilled these two were, her scruples as a teacher began to creep in as Naruto began using more throwing weapons and Neo began to specifically target areas where her hits would deal far more internal damage in hopes of slowing down the stamina monster that was her sparring partner. When both drew out the blades they kept hidden within their respective weapons, Glinda knew that if she let it continue for any longer, blood and a lot of it would be spilled, and that was pushing it further than she had originally intended. "That will be enough, you two!" Glinda boomed, and just at the right time. The two combatants froze, Naruto holding Neo's blade in hand as blood dripped from his closed fist, while the shorter teen looked to have barely dodged his last strike, a shallow cut just below her ribs now visible thanks to the cut in her corset. For a moment they stared into the other's eyes, bright blue meeting dark brown and pink. A blink severed the quick stare down, both rising to their full heights and sheathing their respective weapons. "That was pretty fun. We gotta do it again sometime, Neo," Naruto said with a large grin on his face. In return the silent teen curtsied and offered a cocky smile of her own. Glinda stomped up to the two, a frown etched onto her face. "Fun? Fun! If I hadn't stopped you two, you would both no doubt be in the infirmary and out of commission for the next week at least." The Jinchuriki raised a brow before he realized why the woman was mad at him. "Geez, wonder if she's related to Ba-chan or something." Shaking off that stray thought, Naruto raised his palm, the one that had caught Neo's hidden blade, to show that, although there was still a copious amount of blood on it, the wound itself had long since closed up, leaving not even a scar or any hint that there had even been a nasty cut there. Neapolitan, having been told by Cinder that Naruto had some curious abilities, and also having fought him once before, was none too surprised by the sight. Glinda Goodwitch, however, was astonished. She knew that aura went a long way to improve not only a huntsman's durability, and even sped up the healing process, but this was beyond even that. A wound that would have normally taken a day or two, even with their aura and advanced healing technology, had been stitched close in the matter of a few minutes. There wasn't even any scar tissue or anything to suggest that he had just caught a sword with his bare hand. To further drive the point home, Naruto lifted up his shirt to show the bruises from where Neo had hit him were already clearing up as well, the purple/bluish skin shrinking before vanishing completely, leaving behind perfectly unmarred and tanned skin. Glinda could tell that this healing wasn't just skin deep though. Judging by how easily Naruto was still able to move and breathe, she knew that any internal wounds that he had suffered were more than likely already healed or being healed at this very moment as well. Still astounded by her student's inhuman healing speed, Glinda coughed. "Yes, well, that is still no reason to go so far in what was only supposed to be a simple spar. Not only that, although you may have an abnormal healing speed, Mr. Uzumaki, Ms. Neapolitan does not and will probably need some medical care. As punishment you will be taking her there, and make sure to not agitate any of her wounds. Do I make myself clear?" Naruto gulped in fear as he was on the receiving end of the elder blonde's stern glare. It's like Iruka-sensei and Ba-chan in one. Not wanting to see if she somehow also had Tsunade's monstrous strength, Naruto bowed on reflex. "Hi, sensei!" Before Glinda could question what she had been called, not being acquainted with other languages, the blonde had turned to a grinning Neapolitan who was holding her arms up like a child asking to be carried. The innocent look was ruined by her mocking smile as she did so though. Naruto sighed before gingerly picking up the smaller teen in a bridal carry and began the slow trek back towards the main building where he knew the infirmary was. "Well, I wouldn't be worried too much, Glinda. All he said was yes, teacher, in a rather respectful manner." A brunette woman spoke casually. The woman, a rather attractive 20-something, wore thick rimmed glasses and was dressed in a black cardigan sweater over top a plain white blouse. Her hair was held up in a bun with a few stray bangs framing her face. A small amount of black eyeliner highlighted her honey brown eyes. A pair of fitting tan-colored pants covered her legs while a casual pair of black flats covered her feet, leaving her ankles bare. Etched into the thighs of her pants and her cardigan was what looked to be an owl's face, big eyes and all. She was Olive Panathenia, professor of language and tactics at Beacon. Glinda had asked both her and Ashbin for a conference regarding one Naruto Uzumaki, and what he had said to her earlier that day. Ashbin hummed and thought as he took it in, before he handed the younger woman an innocuous piece of paper. Scanning down the list, Olive had to raise a brow. "What is this? I've never seen such well-articulated use of a dead language. Even I would be hard-pressed to properly pronounce a quarter of these words. It is a list of phrases that Mr. Uzumaki has been heard saying before he uses an attack or in casual conversation. Some have been from monitored matches in Glinda's class and others from word of mouth," the headmaster explained. Further inspecting the list, Olive began reading aloud. Kanahegakure no Sado? Easy enough, the village hidden in the leaves. Katon? Fire release. Futon? Wind release. Fuinjutsu? Sealing techniques. Hai no Ishi means the will of fire. And Jinchuriki. Wait, no. Are you sure he said this, exactly as it is? Surprised by the sudden outburst, Ashbin raised a brow before nodding. Yes. Several students and professors have heard him mention this word, increasingly so as of late. With a grim look on her face, the younger professor spoke. We need to find out what exactly it is he is referring to then. Jinchuriki directly translated means power of the human sacrifice. Are you positive? Glinda exploded, momentarily losing her grasp on her usual strict facade. Even the normally laid-back Ashbin was stupefied. He was by no means as knowledgeable with other languages as Professor Panathenia, but even he knew that many cultures put a heavy emphasis on their words and phrasings. If something was referred to as the power of a human sacrifice, then it was not to be taken lightly. Glinda, get Professor Oobleck in here. Moments later, Bartholomew Oobleck found himself seated alongside one of his peers and his boss, either looking at all as happy or carefree as they usually were. Olive was the first to speak. Oobleck, have you heard the phrase power of the human sacrifice? The green-haired professor thought for a moment before shaking his head in a negative. I cannot say that I have. How about Jinchuriki? The brunette professor asked as she showed him the written kanji for the word. It was here that Oobleck excitedly rose to his feet. Yes. It is a word myself and other archaeologists have encountered numerous times, especially when they are relics from the time before even Grimm. Ashbin spoke. And what does it mean? What are they? Nodding to himself as he paced, Oobleck seemingly ignored the question before speaking to himself. Yes, now it makes sense that they would be looked at as human sacrifices. These Jinchuriki were said to be tools of war, young children chosen specifically to house the souls and powers of 9 immensely powerful entities known as Biju. The tailed beasts? I thought those were nothing but some fairy tale people of that age used to scare children, like the boogeyman. Olive spoke up. Of course she had heard of the Biju. It was such a prominent part of the culture that even learning the language had her seeing the 9 fearsome monsters of destruction being mentioned quite often. Oobleck was suddenly invading her personal space. No. From what we have gathered, these 9 ferocious beasts were very much so real and existed on the physical plane, just as you or I do now. However, records of them disappear from writing and instead Jinchuriki becomes the term mentioned more often. It would make sense as well, as if they were allowed to roam free, we humans wouldn't have been able to evolve and progress. So, through some ritual, it would seem the people of that time sacrificed a child and then turned that child into a weapon of war, the child somehow able to use the powers of the Biju they housed. That's barbaric. Glinda spoke out at last. To give up a human life, the life of someone who couldn't even talk, and then use them as an instrument of death and destruction, it was inhumane. Yes, well, from little we know of that time, it was a time where war, death, and strife were commonplace. However, I would like to know why I was called here for this. Oobleck asked. One of our students, Mr. Uzumaki, has been heard using this word quite often. He is also apparently far more adept at using this supposedly dead language than even Professor Panathenia. Ashbin explained. Yes, well, considering the boy's name is derived from the language, it would only make sense that he knew the language and the terms of that day and age. No? A proverbial light bulb went off in Olive's head as she suddenly rose from her seat. That right? His name, it is also from that language. Depending on how he writes it, it means maelstrom spiral. But I swear I've heard the name Uzumaki from somewhere. Correct. Yuzu. There exists an island far from the main coast of Vale. The island is surrounded by massive whirlpools capable of tearing apart even the most armored ship. It is only accessible by air, and it is a hotbed for archaeological finds as it is a village seemingly frozen in time. However, no one has been able to actually inspect anything except the buildings. What scrolls we can find are somehow closed shut, and we have been unable to open them nor remove them from the island itself. There are even some places that remain closed off from us and, despite our best efforts, cannot be accessed. Oobleck exploded in sheer excitement. You don't think that he is somehow linked to the island, do you? Olive countered. Retreating into thinking mode, Oobleck pondered aloud. It is highly likely. From what we can make out, The island and specifically the village was home to a clan that went by the name of Uzumaki after all. It can't be a coincidence that young Naruto shares the same last name. Finally, Ashbin interrupted the two history lovers and their pseudo-debate. I believe that this would be a perfect mission for Team NNPR, don't you? Why is I'm about to be dragged into some convoluted and dangerous situation sense going off right now? Naruto asked aloud, garnering raised brows from his team. Kurama opened a single eye and muttered, Danger Magnet. Chapter 14. Team NNPR woke up to the sight of their captain sticking to the ceiling above his bed with his thinking face on. Yang had joked that it looked like he was constipated, and even Pira had to admit she wasn't too far off. However, them waking up to him being on the ceiling had become somewhat of a normal occurrence after Kurama had told Naruto that since he still hadn't reached his body's full maturity, his chakra reserves were still growing, and if he continued to shirk his chakra control exercises in favor of working with Pira to get better at wielding High-No-Ishi, then he'd be back to having the poor chakra control he had during his genin days. Hearing that, Naruto was quick to throw himself back into chakra control exercises, wanting to avoid going back to that at all costs. The first time the others had seen him literally walk on walls, Nora had lost her mind and tried as hard as she could to do the same, to no avail. This had provoked Rin into questioning that if Naruto was from the past, why then did the people of his time have such different abilities from the huntsmen of today? Seeing no harm in it, Naruto had explained that he and Kurama had theorized that at some point after the fall of the shinobi era, people had their chakra split into two different energies. The physical manifested itself as aura, and the spiritual aspect gave birth to what they called semblances. Due to the split nature, while it was possible for them to mimic some of the feats of a shinobi enhancing one's body with their aura, using seals, and such, they were unable to use jutsu or perform chakra control exercises like wall walking or kunai balancing, as such feats required the combination of chakra's two aspects. This didn't stop Rin and Pira from trying to do just that, attempting to somehow combine their semblance and aura to see if it was possible to somehow use a mockery of chakra. It hadn't resulted in much aside from fatigue, though Pira had discovered that she could use her control of polarity to mimic wall walking, seeing as how most buildings had quite a generous amount of various metals used in their construction. Aside from that, it had been a rather routine week for Team NNPR thus far. Their personal training as individuals and as a unit had come to a halt, as they were now much more focused on working with their strengths. Naruto was busy working with his chakra control and having Pira help him in better using High-No-Ishi, while said redhead was working on increasing the range of her semblance and pushing herself to use it for longer and more tasking acts, regularly using it for everyday things to aid in that endeavor. Ren was working with Naruto on his speed and agility. While Naruto's specialty wasn't really being fast and agile, his shinobi training meant he was leagues better than some veteran huntsmen. After all, it took some unbelievable levels of reflexes, speed, balance, and coordination to be able to use tree hopping as a form of travel so easily. Nora was just as active and was surprisingly quite serious about improving, spending quite some time either with Naruto and his clones working on reflexes or by herself, pushing the limits of her already unnatural strength. When they weren't training though, they were being normal teenagers going to classes, doing homework, and hanging out with their friends in teams RWBY, CFVY, and C-Many. Of course, this also meant that Naruto was subject to Yang and Koko's teasing, the odd stir of emotions whenever Blake was close, Neo's affections, and Cinder's odd attitude. While he knew said woman was intent on swaying him to join her, she had an odd way of going about it. If he didn't know any better, he'd think she was trying to seduce him. Then of course there was Pira, who he was beginning to act just as oddly. Anytime they touched or even brushed shoulders, her face would instantly turn red and she'd start to stutter. It was almost like she was channeling the spirit of Hinata or something. Of course, anytime this happened, Kurama would shake his head and call him a dumbass for no reason. Despite it still being an hour or so before their day actually began, it looked to be shaping up just like any of those days. That was until there was a knock on their door. Allowing his control to slip, Naruto casually fell from the ceiling and landed in a relaxed position on his bed as Rin went to answer the door. Standing in the doorway was Glinda, someone everyone in the room was surprised to see. Pushing up her glasses, the blonde woman spoke calmly. "It's good to see you all up so early. However, I came here as the headmaster has sent for you for, so if you would follow me." Already dressed in their school uniforms, the 4 teens shrugged as one before following the deputy headmistress out. After a few moments of silence, Glinda spoke up. I'm guessing you're all wondering why you're being called so early to see Ashpin? Arms folded behind his head as he followed behind his fellow blonde, Naruto shook his head. Not really. If he needs us all present, I'm assuming it's because he's gonna tell us about our next mission. Without breaking stride or even showing her surprise that Naruto had so easily guessed the purpose of this little meeting, Glinda responded. Indeed. However, this mission will be a little different than your last one. I'll leave the specifics for Ashpin to explain, but there will probably be little, if any, combat involved. Naruto pouted. He had been looking forward to actually trying out some of the stuff Pira had been working with him on. Maybe he wasn't as much of a danger magnet as Kurama was making him out to be. You will be escorting Professors Oblek and Panathenia on an archaeological expedition to the island of Yuzugakure no Sato. As the sentence rolled off Ashpin's tongue, Naruto's entire mental thought process was taken over by him swearing up a storm as the loud echoing laughter of Kurama roared through their joint connection. Hearing the name of island, the room's occupants consisting of Ashpin, Glinda, the aforementioned professors, and his team, all turned their heads, some wanting to see his reaction and his team wondering what his link to the island was. Any questions? Ashpin asked after a few minutes of silence. Stiffly shaking his head, Naruto replied with a clipped tone. When will we be heading out? Unfazed by the curt reply, Ashpin responded. This Saturday. How long the expedition lasts will rely entirely on what is found, so be prepared for a week at most. Naruto nodded his head before bowing to the professors and made his way out of the office, his mind a flurry with thoughts and questions. Once the 4 teens were out of the room, Olive commented. I hope I wasn't the only one who saw it. Taking a sip of coffee, the silver-haired headmaster shook his head in a negative. No. Young Naruto does indeed know something about the island. However, what it is he knows and his connection to it, bar it being the homeland of his ancestors of millennia ago, remains to be seen. Sighing at the casual dismissal of what could very well be a groundbreaking find for the historical community, the youngest of the present teachers sighed. Well, I'll be off then. I need to begin preparing for the trip ahead as well. Might have to do some brushing up on the language as well. With a wave, the brunette teacher left the office. With a curt nod, Oblek followed his colleague, leaving Ashpin and Glinda alone. The former was seemingly preoccupied by the view that his office afforded him, while the latter, already used to the eccentricities of her friend and boss, crossed her arms and remained quiet. Ashpin, do you really think it was a good idea to put those 4 on a team together? She asked, finally breaking the silence. Not bothering to tear his gaze away from the view, the man replied. And what do you mean by that? Team NNPR has shown itself time and again to be among the most talented of our students here, both individually and as a unit. I know that, but I can't help but worry for them, more so for Nikos, Lyrin, and Valkyrie. Raising a brow, Ashpin slightly turned his head to look at his longtime friend and assistant. Oh? Do you feel that Mr. Uzumaki is somehow a detriment to them? Matching his gaze, Glinda shook her head. No, if anything, he has pushed them to improve far faster than we have seen of any freshman group. However, the cost of that is his affinity for dangerous situations. The night at the docks, their first mission, and now this? Not to mention the incident at that club. While we can't say for sure, you and I both know he had something to do with it. Ashpin took a moment, taking a sip from his ever-present coffee cup before deciding to speak. I agree. From the moment I laid eyes on him at the battle exam, I knew that he was a magnet for such situations. However, was there not a certain young huntress whom you had to personally step in to help when she found herself wrapped up in one of Roman Torchwick's thefts? Was there also not another blonde who visited that same club looking for information only to wind up in a massive all-out brawl? Are those same 2 not also related to several influential and powerful huntsmen and huntresses, all hailed as prodigies of their day? And are those same 2 sisters not on a team with the heiress to the Shinee dynasty alongside a fauness in hiding who is also a former White Fan member? Glinda sighed, seeing the point Ashpin was making. True, Naruto was drawn to situations most veteran huntsmen wouldn't be involved with and was also surrounded by more mysteries and questions than they could even come up with. But he was also no different than each of the 4 girls who made up Team RWBY, each having a tragic backstory and each with their own mental, physical, and emotional scars. For a moment, Glinda had to wonder if her own team and those teams she graduated alongside were just as danger-prone. So when were you gonna tell us you were loaded, Foxy? I mean, owning an island? What next, you got a yacht too? Yan joked. For a moment Naruto wondered if he should tell his fellow blonde that, had he wanted to, he could have bought out a chunk of Hai no Kuni, the Land of Fire, and still had enough left over to pay off the entirety of Tsunade's gambling debt. And that wasn't taking into account the large sum of money he could get if he sold the necklace of the show dame that Tsunade had given to him when they met. Being Hokage wasn't a high-paying job, but neither of his parents were dumb, and had done quite a bit of investing in several businesses. Many of them went on to do well enough, and so the inheritance they had left him was a hefty sum. Then there was the literal fortune that Jiraiya had left him by naming him his sole heir. Loath as he was to admit it, the Ika Ika series was one of the highest-selling written series ever. Still, none of that really equated to much today, seeing as how the vaults and such that held the funds were more than likely miles below the surface or completely destroyed, victims to the ravages of time and nature. Besides that, he had never been one to worry all that much about money. Growing up a poor orphan meant that you weren't exactly allowed to be a materialistic person. Even when he had come into money, he hardly spent it, far more focused on other things like the whole group of insanely powerful criminal shinobi who wanted the biju in his gut thing. Coming back to the present, Naruto took in the faces of the 7 people around him. Seeing as his team and those of Team RWBY knew he was from the past, he felt it was okay to let them know what his team's next mission was. Finding out there was an island that had not only survived from before even he was born and was the home of his clan was pretty surprising for everyone. Weiss was the one to start the questions. "Wait, I thought you were from that Leaf Village place?" Naruto sighed. "I am from Konoha. My mom wasn't though. She, like all Uzumaki, was from Yuzu no Kuni, the land of whirlpools, where my clan had their own hidden village, Yuzushiogakure no Sato, or the village hidden by the whirling tides." Blake raised another question they all wanted to know. How'd she end up in Konoha then? Konoha and Yuzushio were pretty close, mostly because the Uzumaki were distant cousins to one of Konoha's 2 founding clans, the Senju. It also helps that the heiress of our clan went on to marry the first, further uniting the Senju and Uzumaki. She was also Kurama's first Jinchuriki. Even though we Uzumaki were known for being able to live incredibly long lives, she eventually got to that age. Seeing as how Kurama was too powerful to seal into an object or any plain kid like the other Biju, they needed another Uzumaki to be the new host, and that's where my mom came in. Naruto explained. The others? Oh, at the explanation, RWBY asked the only logical question left to ask. What happened to it? Naruto grimaced. True, he had personally never gotten the chance to visit his clan's homeland, but from what he had read in his mother's diary, a gift from Tsunade, and from what little Kurama knew of them, the Uzumaki put family and loved ones above all else, a trait he had clearly inherited. As such, the story of how almost the entirety of his clan was destroyed was rather depressing. Shortly after my mom came to Konoha, 3 of the big 5, the 5 strongest hidden villages, agreed that Yuzushio and the Uzumaki, with our unmatched affinity to Fuinjutsu and insane longevity, were too much of a threat to leave alone. So the hidden mist, cloud, and stone joined forces and invaded Yuzu. Yuzushio put up a fight and managed to take out or critically wound the other village's Kages. But in the end Yuzushio fell. That's horrid. Why take out an entire village and its people? Just because you were scared of what they could become? Yang exploded. It was clear that she wasn't the only one angered though, Weiss wearing a disgusted sneer while the others showed their own displeasure on their face. In turn Naruto shrugged. It was the shinobi era. From what Ero-sennin told me, wars had been started over far stupider reasons. Not that many people even knew why either of the 2 great shinobi world wars were even started in the first place. It took a moment for the others to come to grips with the harsh reality that had been the far distant past. Meanwhile Naruto gathered his own thoughts. It had been horrifyingly shocking for him to learn about what many saw as the true purpose of shinobi. They weren't heroes. They weren't the knights in shining armor that came to rescue the princess like many of he and his friends had thought back in the academy days. No, shinobi were killers. They were thieves, liars, cheats, and backstabbers for the right price, of course. However, this was not true for huntsmen. Huntsmen were protectors, those who refused to sit back and instead took up arms to keep the people of Remnant safe from the things that went bump in the night. It didn't matter if it were grim or human. Those that wished to harm those under their protection would need to go through those brave men and women who dedicated their lives to stopping them. In a way, the dreams of peace and unity that Jiraiya, his father, and Nagato had so dearly wished to see come true had, sort of. True, there was still unrest, especially when concerned with faunus, but the world was now far more united than what had ever been possible during the shinobi era. And there were strides, small ones sure, to even put a stop to the prejudice against faunus. When the others had finally accepted the kind of world that Naruto had lived in, Rin posed a question that should have been rather obvious to ask. If all the other villages and places from that time are gone now, then how has your family's island stood standing? It was invaded before even you were born and it's still around today? How is that possible? Naruto shrugged. I honestly don't know. This is the first I'm hearing of it too. My best guess is that either the village or probably the whole island is covered in seals that would keep even nature at bay. You think Professor Ashbin knows about you? RWBY asked. Naruto scratched his head before leaning back in his chair. Hard to say. I know him and Glinda have been suspicious of me ever since initiation. He probably knows I'm the only one who could unlock all the stuff that's sealed up, which is why he's sending us. Stretching out more, the blonde closed his eyes. I doubt he knows or even thinks I'm from the past, though. And even if he knew, I doubt he'd care. He is pretty odd himself. The other's sweat dropped. Sure, Ashbin was pretty eccentric, but Naruto was acting as if his being from thousands of years ago wasn't all that surprising. Then again, he was from a time where walking on water was an apparently normal occurrence. Going on a mission without us. Look at you, all grown up now. Came a familiar voice. Naruto just grinned as the members of Team CFVY came around. Maybe having a meeting where he talked about being a shinobi from thousands of years ago in a public place like the library wasn't the smartest of calls. If I didn't know any better, Coco, I'd think you were stalking me. The blonde quipped. Naruto's cocky smirk was quickly replaced by a blush as the older teen wrapped her arms around his neck. No, just doing my job as an upperclassman and keeping an eye out for my cute little underclassmen. The others laughed as Naruto began to blush and sputter at the intimate contact. Well, most were laughing at the troubles of their friend. Pyrrha and Blake weren't exactly happy to see someone else so brazenly flirting with the object of their affections. Attempting, and failing, to hide her giggles, Velvet placed a hand on her captain's shoulder. Okay, Coco, we have to get ready for our own mission, remember? With her usual smirk in place, Coco released her hold on the younger teen and ruffled his hair. Be careful out there, Whiskers. Grumbling at having his hair tousled like a child, Naruto waved a goodbye to the older teens, wishing them luck on their own mission. Rising out of his seat and stretching to get any kinks out, Naruto spoke. We should probably get ready for our mission too. I need to stop by the AH shop and pick up Hino Ishii. That caught everyone's attention. Not even his team was aware that Naruto was without his staff. Is that why you haven't been using it in out spars? Pyrrha questioned. Naruto chuckles nervously. Right, I totally forgot to tell you guys I left Hino Ishii with them so they could work on it for me. Being the weapons fanatic that she was, RWBY was quick to get up in the blonde's face. Work? What are they doing to it? I thought it was just a staff with a hidden blade. Can I go with you to see it? Laughing as the younger teen shot off a million questions in the span of a few seconds, Naruto just shook his head. Sorry, Red, but I wanted to be surprised. Seeing the scythe wielder go from starry-eyed to pouting in the blink of an eye, the half-blood Uzumaki added. How about after we get back from our mission we have a little spar, Team RWBY versus Team NNPR? Everyone perked up at that. It was widely known throughout the school that while Team NNPR was being touted as the strongest team of freshmen, Team RWBY was not far behind. Having different time slots for their battle class meant they had never actually seen which of them was the better, a question on the minds of many students and professors alike. Yang rose to her feet with a cocky grin and punched her fists together. Oh, I am so game, Foxy. Weiss shrugged. Why not? Sounds like it could actually be a good way to see which of us is better. Blake copied her teammate and shrugged. Sure. RWBY, seeing that her whole team was game, nodded. Well, we're in. Turning to his team, Naruto waited to see their responses. Ren shrugged indifferently. It would be a good way to see how our training is going. Nora seemed to be deep in thought, garnering raised brows from everyone, not expecting the usually impulsive teen to actually take the time. What if we win? Now that caused everyone to perk up. The orange-haired teen had raised a rather good point. Sure, they could have the spar just as a measuring bar and a way to have some friendly bonding, but if they wagered something, it made it all the more enticing. Grinning, Yang nodded. I like the way you think, Nora. Naruto shared his fellow blonde's excitement. Sounds good to me. But we gotta agree on the terms and who gets what. Nodding, each team turned and began to discuss what they would want if they won their little sparring match. Of course, Team RWBY was quick to agree on what they wanted to be their reward. Team and NPR took a little longer, seeing as either Ren nor Pira were really all that invested in winning or gambling, content to take the spar at face value. Nora, despite being the one who had brought up the idea of wagering something for the match, kept her own reward simple. Naruto couldn't come up with anything, not really needing much, so he decided to go the same route as Nora, sort of. Well, we've decided that if we win, we want Naruto to help us train for a week, RWBY declared with a bright smile. Raising a brow at the request, Naruto shrugged. They were his friends after all, and if he could help them grow stronger, then he wouldn't really mind. It wasn't like he could really teach them much outside of physical conditioning either. Since they lacked chakra, they couldn't learn any jutsu, and he wasn't exactly a weapons master, especially knowing just how complex the weapons the girls of Team RWBY wielded. Seriously, a scythe that could also fire off rounds with enough force to punch through steel? Even he thought it was a bit of overkill. And that wasn't even mentioning Blake's own weapon that he knew could transform into a handful of different weapons. Alright, sounds good to me, but when we win, Nora wants a bottle of syrup from each of you, and I want RWBY's help with no Ishi. Naruto rebutted. That caused brows, even the ones on his team, to rise. Seeing their questioning looks, the blonde Jinchuriki explained. What? Nora said she's almost out. The other's sweat dropped while Weiss exclaimed. We weren't wondering about that, you idiot. We're wondering why you want RWBY's help. Crossing his arms, Naruto huffed. Well, you don't have to be so mean about it. Seeing Weiss barely restraining herself from attempting to strangle him brought a smirk to his face before he explained. Well, Red seems to be a bit of weapon enthusiast, and I figured she could help me get a better grip with no Ishi, said silver-eyed Teen, blushed in embarrassment as her friend brought up her rather over-the-top love of all things that went boom and were pointy. Still, she stuck out her hand. Deal! Naruto shook his fellow captain's hand, sealing the deal. As the cool air of the sea blew in across the docks, ruffling blonde locks, Naruto tried to rein in the flurry of emotions that had been growing steadily stronger as this day grew closer. Happiness, excitement, anxiousness, and curiosity all mingled as one single thought echoed in his mind. I'm finally gonna get to see Kasan's home. My clan's home. Naruto was pulled from his own reverie when he felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning, he couldn't help but smile as he stared into the emerald-green eyes of his red-haired teammate. He found himself speechless, though, as he took the time to actually take in the view. With the sun barely having risen an hour or so ago, the sea breeze gently blowing her vibrant red tresses, and the small but genuinely caring smile on her face, Pira Nikos looked stunning. Sure, he knew damn well that his teammate and friend was one of, if not the, most attractive girl in Vale, something many magazines and tabloids made sure to point out, but more often than not, her looks were the furthest thing from his mind. She was his friend and partner first and foremost. How are you feeling, Naruto? She asked softly. Sighing and raking a hand through his hair, Naruto grinned. Excited. Nervous. Allowing a small laugh to escape her lips, Pira spoke. Well, remember, I'll be with you the whole way through. Offering a genuine smile of gratitude, the blonde teen nodded. Thanks, Pira-chan. Pira blushed at Naruto's way of addressing her. Being a little curious about his various nicknames for everyone, she had decided to do a little research to find out what the chan honorific meant. Needless to say, she couldn't stop smiling for the rest of the day. Don't forget us! Nora shouted as she popped up to Naruto's left side. Nora! I told you to leave them alone! Ren scolded as he joined the rest of his team. Laughing at the childhood friends, Naruto threw his hands behind his head and grinned. Well, we got a mission to do, so let's go! Glad to see you're all ready to go, came a voice from behind them. Turning, the team stared at the two professors who would be accompanying them to Yuzu. Olive had ditched her usual outfit in favor of something more suited to excursions. A black long-sleeved trench coat reached down to mid-thigh with a simple dark blue shirt bearing her owl-eyed symbol on the navel underneath it. A pair of form-fitting worn gray, almost black pants reached to just above her ankles with a belt of simple blue cloth wrapped around her waist, held closed with a fist-sized silver medal not unlike Pira's, except hers once more had her owl eyes on it. A simple pair of black flats covered her feet. What caught their attention more than her change in clothing, though, was the shield that rested on her back. It was rather small, taking up only a small portion of the small of her back, with what looked to be the head of a gorgon etched into the center of it, glaring angrily at all who stared into it. Yes, I do believe our transport will be here shortly as well, their other professor commented. Oblek had also ditched his usual dress clothes in favor of a tan trench coat that reached his calves, a lighter tan shirt underneath that, and a pair of dark olive green pants, an explorer's hat covering his wild green locks. Unlike the female professor, he had no visible weapon on him, just a rather bulky backpack and a thermos. As if on command, the bullhead and its pilot came into view and landed a couple yards away. Stepping out of the large aerial transport, a gruff-looking make waves. "Just need to fuel up real quick and we'll be on our way. Feel free to get comfortable as the island is pretty far out of the way." With a resolute gleam to his eyes, Naruto led the way to the carrier. When the pilot had said Yuzugakure was out of the way, he meant it. Despite having left at 6 in the morning, they seemed no closer to Yuzu, the sun reaching the apex of its journey across the sky some hours ago, and all anybody had seen for the past half hour was a seemingly endless amount of water. Ren had taken to simply enjoying the view, Nora snoozing away and drooling on his shoulder. Professor Panathenea was reading a book quietly while Professor Oblek was fiddling with something in his backpack. Kurama, the lazy fox that he was snoozing away on his container's lap while Naruto's shoulder served as a pillow for Pira, who had fallen asleep at some point during the trip. The blonde was rereading his mother's diary in hopes that it would give him some idea for what he should be prepared for. However, those who were awake rose to attention when the voice of their pilot came from the cockpit. "The island should be coming into view soon. Due to whatever defenses these people set up, I can't actually land in the village, so we'll touch down on the outskirts." Naruto and Rin roused their sleeping teammates from their naps, the blonde mentally conversing with his partner, Kurama. How well protected was Yuzu? "Not even opening an eye," the Biju replied. "From what little I know from being in Mito and your mother, the Uzumaki were extremely paranoid and made sure to cover near every inch of the village in protective seals. For all intents and purposes, the actual village is protected by a bubble, stopping attacks from both the air and underground. Some of the lower tails would have had trouble getting in." A few minutes later, and the group were stretching their limbs, enjoying the fact they were on solid ground yet again. Naruto took the time to enjoy the scenery of his ancestral home. Although they had landed in a rather large clearing, it was clear to see that either nature had reclaimed the island, or the Uzumaki had never bothered cultivating the land in the first place. Flat lands with lush grass was all one could see, the noises of various critters scurrying around filling the air. Up ahead, the walls of Uzushio stood proudly, monolithic in size and intimidating to the others. For Naruto, though, it felt like home. The minute he stepped on the island, he could feel his chakra thrum in time with that of the islands. Without even trying, he knew that Sennin Moto was a thought away. It was comforting. As much as he enjoyed Beacon and Vale, the city life and distance from nature was slightly unsettling. Even the most technologically advanced cities in his day were never so far removed from nature. Taking a deep breath, the blonde enjoyed the rush of fresh air that flowed into his lungs. "Well, I got enough fuel for the ride back and that's about it, so when we leave, we ain't coming back for some time," the pilot announced. Everyone made some sound or gesture of having heard the man when Oblek stepped up. "The wall that surrounds the village is not simply for show. Many archaeologists have tried and failed to find a hole in it or the invisible wall that protects the actual village. As such, we will be making the trek to the entrance of the village that lays on the other side of where we are now." Naruto narrowed his eyes at that. He knew that every shinobi village, even the hyper-militaristic Kumo, had several different entrances. The main gates were for foreign dignitaries, merchants, and the like, but each shinobi was told of its village's other, secret, entrances should they ever need to use them. "Actually, I think I might be able to find us another way, so we don't have to walk to the opposite side of the island," Naruto spoke. So Ashbin was right. "This trip is gonna be interesting, I just know it," Olive thought to herself. "Very well then, Mr. Uzumaki, lead the way." Turning to his team, Naruto went into mission mode. "Pira, with me up front. Rin, Nora, bring up the rear. Professors, stay behind Pira." That said, the blonde captain reached for his scroll and in a poof smoke held high no ishi in his hand. Seeing that, the rest of his team reached for their own weapons and took up their positions. As they began the trek towards the wall in the distance, Naruto was on high alert, sending chakra to his ears, nose, and eyes to heighten his senses even further. Despite the village having been left in ruins millennia ago, it was still a shinobi village, and he doubted any of the expeditions found all of the traps that no doubt covered the island. The island seemed intent on disproving this, the group of 6 having their walk undeterred. Remember, they were invaded, so no doubt most of the traps and defenses meant to keep out such a force were used up that night. At this point, the only real defenses left are the wall, and whatever seals are still active, Kurama chimed in. Judging by the fact that RWBY was now investigating the wall without anything harming him, Naruto was inclined to agree. So, if I may ask, how do you plan on getting us in from here? Olive asked. Everyone turned to Naruto with curious stares. To them, they could see no chinks in the structure or signs of a secret passageway, which they had assumed was what Naruto was going to be looking for. Of course, it wouldn't exactly be secret if they could find it. This was Uzushio, home to the Uzumaki clan. It would not be that simple for them. He hadn't instantly taken up Fuinjutsu, but after Jiraiya's death and being told who his parents were, he had taken up the art during his sage training with the toads on Mt. Mayaboku. Pa-ma, and even Kurama, still being in his asshole phase, admitted that he took to the art like any full-blooded Uzumaki, though the latter had admitted it grudgingly and with much cursing and name-calling. Placing a palm on the wall, Naruto sent out a pulse of chakra. Feeling a slight ping from just to his right, the half-blood Uzumaki found what he was looking for. Moving his hand over just slightly, the others watched with wide eyes as the blonde bit into his thumb hard enough to draw blood. Before they could raise any questions, he swiped the bloody digit across the wall in a seemingly random spot. When nothing happened for a few seconds, Professor RWBY spoke up. Right, then we shall resume our trek around the perimeter of the wall. Let's be dash. The oddball professor was cut off when a single intricate seal appeared where Naruto had left his blood, glowing a faint blue. The others stared in awe as several more of the unintelligible scribbles to them appeared in a circle around it, and began to glow the same luminescent blue. Following that, a rectangular section of the wall faded away, like it had never even existed in the first place. Slack-jawed, the others could only stare blankly into the darkness that awaited them. What was that? Olive exclaimed in shock. Fuinjutsu. The Uzumaki clan was famous for their mastery of the art of seals, and it's also the reason why this island is still standing. It and the village are practically covered in them, Naruto explained. RWBY was busy jotting down notes on a notepad. I see, so the etchings that covered the walls and such are actually safety mechanisms? Before Naruto could respond, everyone's eyes were once more drawn to the entrance of the passage, the earth-shaking steps of something growing louder and more prominent with each passing second. Stepping out from the dark tunnel and into the light of the open was what could only be described as a golem. Its massive hulking form looked to stand a few inches taller than both Naruto and Pira's 6-foot stature, and was made of a smooth black stone of some sort. It bore no memorable features, looking like it was hewn from a single piece of stone. However, there was one thing that put most of them at ease. Etched into its burly chest in a deep red was the spiral of the Uzumaki clan. Despite the surprise appearance of the Guardian, RWBY was still burning through pages in his notepad. Interesting, no other expedition has had any encounter with a Guardian Golem before. Only a half hour and already this trip is turning out to be well of knowledge and information. Please tell me you know how to disable this thing, Mr. Uzumaki. Professor Panathenia spoke. I'm an Uzumaki? Everyone's sweat dropped in unison. You've got to be kidding me. Olive face-palmed. My mom's diary never said anything about golems, alright. It could need a password, or it might just need my blood like the seal. I don't know. Naruto defended. Kurama hopped down from his usual perch and took up a spot on Pira's shoulders. I'm gonna laugh when this blows up in your face, Gaki. Naruto turned back and childishly stuck his tongue out at the Biju before turning around and staring at the faceless golem. Seeing that it wasn't going to move from its current position, the blonde shrugged and once more bit into his thumb before smearing some blood across the chest of the stone guardian. Raising a brow when nothing happened, the blonde turned to his teammates and professors. See? No big deal. However, as Naruto began to step around the golem, before anyone could blink, the stone guardian brought up one of its massive limbs and buried it into an unsuspecting Naruto's side. The Jinchuriki was hit with enough force that he was sent hurtling yards away, eventually coming to a stop amidst a cloud of dirt and debris. Naruto! Pira cried out in alarm. Ha 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 ha! Oh Kami, that was great! Kurama barked out, rolling around the ground holding his furry sides. Naruto's attempt at going around the golem seemed to have kicked it into action, the guardian taking lumbering steps towards the rest of them. Nora was the first to jump into action. With a battle cry, she aimed a swing of her hammer at the golem. Whatever speed it had displayed before did not apparently translate into dodging attacks, and so the behemoth took a full-on hit from Magnahild, and did not budge. Nora and the others stared wide-eyed as the stone thing did not move a single centimeter, nor were there any cracks in its stone skin. Seeing the golem turn its head to look at the shocked Nora, Ren put as much aura as he could into his legs and burst into a dead sprint, managing to pluck his friend out of harm's way just before Nora could join Naruto. As the rest of his team tried to figure out how to even damage the Stone Guardian, said Blonde was currently laying on his back moaning in pain. "Dear Kami, that thing hits even harder than Sakura-chan. Wonder if this is how Ero-sennin felt every time Ba-chan smacked him around for perving?" Feeling his chakra already flowing towards his not doubt shattered ribs and whatever other wounds he had sustained, Naruto let out another groan of pain. "What is that thing made of? I even used my semblance!" Nora cried out, genuinely shocked. Ren shook his head and began to pepper the golem with rounds from his twin SMGs. "I don't know, but we better figure out how to stop it and quick." When the lumbering behemoth stepped out of the cloud of dust that had been kicked up due to Ren's hail of bullets, completely unscathed, the raven-haired teen silently cursed. He knew his bullets weren't exactly known for their penetrating power, but he had hoped to at least be able to scratch the thing. Pyrrha took her chance and slipped a cartridge of fire-type dust into Milo. Aiming down her sights, the red-headed unloaded the full clip directly into the golem. Even with the added punch from the dust, a combination that had even managed to give the ancient Deathstalker from their initiation pause, the golem kept moving, not deterred in the slightest. Before either her or Nora and Rin could try anything else, Olive and Oblique stepped up. "That's enough. I think it's time we step in." With her piece said, the brunette professor grabbed her shield, holding it in her left hand. The small thing began to shift, growing larger as plates seemed to come from the center and move outwards, adding to the overall circumference of it. When the shield was a little bigger than her torso, Olive reached behind it and pulled out a small metallic bar. The bar, however, began to extend, forming into a spear far longer than she was tall. Oblique likewise took up a battle stance, his thermos transforming into what seemed to be part cudgel part cannon, if the hole at the top was anything to go by. "I agree. Even we scholars need to dirty our hands from time to time after all," Oblique stated. In a burst of speed, Olive was off, Oblique not far behind. In seconds they closed the gap between them and the golem, the brunette professor ramming her shield into golem before duck under a swing. The spastic professor followed suit, and then slammed his own weapon into the golem, to no avail. Jumping back, Olive reached into her coat and pulled out a row of chain gun ammo, a deep brown color signifying their elemental alignment. She slid the belt of bullets into the back of her shield and pulled the trigger behind it, the mouth of the Medusa on the front of the shield opening to let out a hail of bullets. Oblique was at her side, firing off blazing balls of fire from his thermos. Soon the golem was engulfed in a cloud of flames of gunfire. Not wanting to sit idly by, the three members of Team NPR took up their own weapons and added to the veritable storm of bullets. Doubting that any of it would put the behemoth down, Pyrrha called out, "Nora! Gravity!" Knowing what that meant, the bubbly girl saluted, then shifted Magnahild back into its hammer form before making a mad dash towards a crouching Pyrrha. Using a Ko as a platform, Nora leapt into the air and stood on Magnahild like a scooter, firing off a round to gain even more height. "Run! Pincer!" came the redhead's following orders. The raven-haired teen nodded, already pumping aura into his arms. As Nora began her descent back down, a faint pink glow surrounding Magnahild, both Pyrrha and Ren rushed the golem from opposite sides. Seeing what the three were planning, Olive and Oblique decided to really block in the Stone Guardian, coming from the other two sides. As one, the five collided with the golem. Nora's hit plowing into its head with enough power to push it into the ground. Ren aimed a palm strike at its back, pumping his aura through it. Pyrrha met the force of Ren's push with her own, using her semblance to push a Ko. Olive copied the younger teen's strategy, and pushed her own shield into the golem, firing rounds off at the same time to push forward. Oblique likewise used the momentum from his own shots to push forward. With as much force as was being exerted on it from all sides, the golem should have very well imploded. However, it did not, merely shunting everyone off it with a single swipe of its mighty arms and stepping out of the slight crater it had been pushed into. "How is this thing still standing? There's no way it should have been able to survive that!" Olive shouted in frustration. As the golem took another step forward, a shout from the distance rang out. "Suetun, Suryudan no Jutsu, water release, water dragon bullet!" Turning, the others could only watch in awe as a massive serpentine beast made of water roared ferociously, eyes glowing in anger. The beast of legend and myth proceeded to slam into the golem, actually managing to push it back and cutting deep trenches into the ground around it. Such was the pressure it was exerting. The assault didn't end there, though. Suetun, Daibakufu no Jutsu, water release, great waterfall. The water that had been used to create the water dragon and had soaked the ground surged back to life, climbing higher and higher. What was once a beast was now a several yards high wall of water. The imposing structure stood tall for a second before cascading down, like a body of water that had been held back by a dam. Pira heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing a familiar mop of hair rushing to join them. Naruto! You're okay. Grinning, said Blonde gave her a thumbs up. It's gonna take a lot more than that to put me down. Olive interrupted. And as devastating as your own attacks were, it's gonna take a lot more to put that thing down as well. Turning, they all saw a now soaking wet golem begin to resume its move forward, seemingly untouched while the landscape around it had been drastically altered, pristine grass and earth now muddied and devastated as if hit by a natural disaster. Why don't we just go around it? Nora asked aloud. In all fairness, it was a rather poignant question. The stone being was obviously incapable of traveling great distances at any sort of rapid pace while they were all quite nimble on their feet. I'd rather not spend the rest of our stay here worried about this thing finding us and trying to kill us. Best to put it down now, Naruto replied. And how do you suggest we do that? Olive snarked her back, rather irritated that a slow-moving stone thing had withstood her hits. She wasn't vain, but she was a trained huntress who had put down her fair share of grim and had earned herself a reputation as a genius tactician and equally capable fighter. Yet here this thing was, still intent on seeing them all buried 6 feet under and not even scratched in the slightest. Cracking a cocky grin, Naruto stretched his right hand out, palm facing up. Leave that to me. Both Oblek and Olive watched in curiosity as wisps of blue energy began to circle in the palm of Naruto's hand, picking up speed and density. Before they could even register what was happening, there was a spinning ball of energy sitting in the teen's hand. His teammates, having seen him use a far more powerful version of this, were curious to see how much damage the smaller-scale version was capable of. Leaping at the slow-moving golem, Naruto stretched out his hand and called out, Rasengan! Naruto's cocky smirk soon fell off though as he noticed one of his favorite attacks was barely scratching the golem. When the golem swung at him, the blonde was prepared this time, and quickly jumped away. What the hell? This thing just took a full-on Rasengan like it was nothing. Considering that your clan no doubt made this thing, they probably put chakra-draining seals on it somewhere. The only thing that can stop it is either someone who knows the password or complete obliteration, Kurama commented. Guys, I'm gonna need you to back up. The only way we're gonna stop this thing is if we completely destroy it, and I have a few jutsu that can do it, but I need you all far away from here to do them. Having nothing but confidence in his captain and friend, Ren nodded and grabbed Nora, pulling her along with him. Do not do anything rash, Mr. Uzumaki. We still need you active after this, Oblek said casually before walking away. Olive huffed. Men always have to have some macho display. She joined her fellow professor in walking away soon after. Pura clenched her fist, before walking straight up to Naruto, staring him down in the eyes with her bright green eyes. Naruto was slightly surprised by the intensity and raw emotion that swirled in his teammate's emerald eyes. As he opened his mouth to question what she was doing, he found himself unable to speak. I believe in you. The following kiss on the cheek put all cognitive thought on hold. Before he could even make a sound, the redhead was off to join the others some distance away. Your girl problems aside, it's been some time since you've used this, any? Kurama mocked. Naruto shook his head. Shut up, Bakukitsune. Closing his eyes, Naruto shut out the outside world. He pushed aside the sounds of the lumbering steps of the golem. Shut out the presence of the others. Instead, he focused on the smell of the dirt, the feel of the wind as it kissed him. He felt the chakra of the critters that scurried about on the island, the chakra that thrummed in the trees and plants that dotted his ancestral home. He felt it all and allowed the chakra of nature into his body, mingling with his own reserves and amplifying them. What seemed to be a handful of minutes to him was only a second, if that, as he opened his eyes once more. Gone were the bright sapphires, replaced by the slit pupils and honey-colored eyes of a fox. Raising a brow, Naruto took note in the difference between his current sage mode and that of the one when he was still back in his own time. Oh, Kurama, how come I have fox eyes instead of toad ones? Raising a brow, the Biju shrugged somehow. The toads of MT Maiboka probably don't exist anymore, and so either does your connection to them, Because of that, your sage form took up the features of the only other animal-like entity you're aligned to, me. Naruto took it in stride. Sounds good to me. Rotating his neck, the teen stretched, getting used to the feeling of being in sage mode after not having used it in some time. I gotta do this more often, almost forgot how good it feels. Raising his palm above his head, he began to gather the necessary chakra to form one of the most devastating jutsu in his arsenal, being in sage mode making it all that much easier to perform the necessary shape and nature manipulation. Sorry buddy, I hate to do this to a family heirloom, but you got to go. Futon, raise and shuriken. From their vantage point atop a small hill, the group of 3 teens and 2 professors could only stare as what looked to be a miniature nuclear warhead exploded where Naruto and the golem had been. A dome of pure white energy encased the entire area, blinding them to what was going on inside it. Seconds later, the 5 of them had to throw up their arms in front of their faces as the winds slammed into them, howling in their ears as if it were a beast of some sort. The 3 other members of Team NPR had of course seen the attack before, but it had detonated miles out at sea, far from them. Being only a mile or more away, they could now get a true understanding of the destruction their captain was capable of. For the 2 professors, this was unbelievable. Sure, they had seen some powerful individuals, both human and grim, but to see someone so young wielding such power was incredible. This is unreal! Olive exclaimed as the winds finally slowed. Smiling, Pyrrha shook her head. No, it's just Naruto. Seeing the dome begin to collapse, the teen broke into a dead sprint, making her way back towards her friend. Wait for us! Nora called out as she forcibly dragged Ren along with her. Nora! Shaking her head, Olive whistled as the amount of destruction that had been brought on by a single human was finally revealed. Well, if that didn't completely destroy that thing, I don't know what will. Come on, Oblek. Don't need these kids hurting themselves or anything. Turning, she found the spot where her fellow professor and huntsman had been was now vacant. Blinking, she spotted said green-haired man not far behind the 3 teens of Team NPR. Hey! Wait for me! Omake number 2, the Mole Wars. It was dark times at Beacon Academy. No one could really recall how it had started or why, but all they knew was that with each passing minute the death toll was steadily climbing. Tears and blood were being shed in equal amounts. No one was safe. No one. Pretty please? A certain red-cloaked young huntress to be asked her blonde friend and fellow captain, silver/gray eyes shining with unshed tears as her lower lip trembled. Oh dear God, it's too adorable! Arg! Mike! 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 Why did it have to be you? Naruto shivered as he stared into the face of what could only be adorable given physical form. Feeling a tug on the sleeve of his jacket, he turned to see Neo, hands clasped together, as she mimicked RWBY. My eyes! Cassie! Not you too! When will this end? Someone, just stop this madness! As the wails of those poor unfortunate souls unlucky enough to catch a glimpse of the pure and unadulterated cuteness that was RWBY and Neo vying for the attention of one Naruto Uzumaki. At the same time, the members of Team RWBY, and NPR, and C-Many were off to the sides laughing at the misfortune of their shinobi friend. Yang and Nora were crying tears while Rin was openly chuckling. Pyrrha was laughing behind her hand, and even Emerald and Mercury were enjoying seeing Naruto suffer. All right. Fine. I give. I'll buy the damn strawberries! Naruto shouted as tears streamed down his face. Yay! RWBY cheered. Neo was not happy with this development, and showed it by pouting. Tugging on his sleeve again, Neo stared straight into Naruto's eyes and began to sniffle. Sniffle! A small tear forming at the corner of her now pink eyes. Tell my MOM I love her! Damn it, Jenkins! Stay with me! Okay. I'll buy your cake! But, my strawberries! Cammy, save me!